The eviction notice was stapled to the apartment door at 6:47 a.m. Elena Prescott saw it before she'd even unlocked the deadbolt, her hand still fumbling with keys while her other clutched a thermos of lukewarm coffee. The third shift at the hospital had run long again. Her eyes locked on the red stamp, the official letterhead, the words that punched her in the gut like a physical blow. Final notice. 72 hours to vacate. 72 hours. She pulled the paper down with trembling fingers, her gaze scanning for details she already knew by heart. $47,000 in back rent. Utilities. Late fees that seemed to multiply like a virus every time she checked the balance. The name at the top of the lease was Daniel Kane, her Daniel Kane, and the anger that flooded through her was so sharp, so sudden, that she had to grip the doorframe to steady herself. She'd worked through the night at 3 different jobs to make this month's payment. 3 jobs. 16 hours on her feet. 6 hours cleaning offices in the financial district, 8 hours as a night nurse at Metropolitan Hospital, 2 hours restocking shelves at a 24-hour grocery store that smelled like spoiled produce and broken dreams. Her lower back throbbed. Her feet felt like they'd been set on fire and then stomped on repeatedly. And it still wasn't enough. The apartment door swung open behind her, and there he was. Daniel Kane emerged from the darkness of their bedroom, shirtless, his dark hair disheveled in that careless way that had once made her heart stutter. He was holding his phone, scrolling absently, not yet aware of her presence or the apocalypse that had just arrived at their door. He looked tired too, or maybe just hungover. With Daniel, it was becoming harder to tell the difference. "You're home early," he murmured, still not looking up. Elena held up the notice, her hand shaking with something that tasted like rage and desperation mixed together. "We have 72 hours, Daniel. 72 hours to find somewhere else to live." That got his attention. He looked up from his phone, his gray eyes registering the paper, then her face, and something flickered across his expression. Was it guilt? Fear? It was gone too quickly for her to identify. "Shit," he whispered. "Shit." Elena's voice cracked. "That's all you have to say? I worked through the night. Again. I've been working 4 jobs for 6 months, Daniel. 6 months. Do you understand what that means? Do you have any idea what I've sacrificed?" The hallway behind her was silent except for the hum of the apartment building's aging air conditioning unit. It was 7 a.m. on a Tuesday, and the world outside was just waking up. People were probably heading to their offices right now, people with normal jobs, people who didn't have to choose between eating and paying rent, people whose partners actually contributed to their own survival. Daniel set his phone down on the kitchen counter, slowly, carefully, like the gesture required all his concentration. "Don't." She held up a hand, the eviction notice crinkling in her grip. "Don't apologize. Don't make promises. Don't tell me it's going to be okay, because clearly it's not okay. Your debts are drowning us. Your family's medical bills, your failed business venture, that money you borrowed from people I'm too afraid to ask about. It's all on me now. And I'm tired, Daniel. I'm so tired I can barely remember what sleep feels like." He flinched at that, his jaw tightening. The thing was, Elena had loved him. She'd loved him fiercely, desperately, the kind of love that made you believe you could conquer anything together. She believed in him when he believed in himself, back when they were first dating, back when he talked about building something, creating something meaningful. She believed in him even after the first bankruptcy, even after the second. She believed him when he said he'd fix it, that it would all work out, that he just needed a little time and support and love. But belief, Elena was learning, was a resource that could be depleted. "I need to shower," she said quietly, moving past him toward the bathroom. "I have 2 more hours before my shift at the grocery store. Then I work at the clinic at 2 p.m. Then back to the hospital at 10 p.m. "Elena, wait." She closed the bathroom door before he could finish. The lock clicked into place with a finality that felt almost spiritual. Through the thin walls, she could hear him pacing, could hear the faint buzz of his phone vibrating against the counter. Probably texting one of his friends. Probably making excuses. Probably doing absolutely nothing to solve the problem that was systematically destroying their life. The shower water was cold. It always was, this time of morning, and Elena stood under the spray, watching her reflection blur in the steamed mirror behind the clear glass. She barely recognized herself anymore. When had her face gotten so hollow? When had those lines appeared around her eyes? The eviction notice was still in her hand, somehow. She'd brought it into the bathroom like a talisman, like proof of something, though she wasn't quite sure what. 72 hours. She had 72 hours to figure out what came next. Find an apartment they couldn't afford. Ask friends for money she couldn't repay. Move back in with her mother in Queens, which meant giving up the private nursing gigs that paid best because of the commute. Or leave. The thought arrived with such clarity, such sharp-edged certainty, that Elena had to grip the shower wall to stay upright. She could leave. She could pack a bag, take her name off the lease, disappear into the city, and start over. She was talented. Her supervisors at the hospital told her constantly that she had gifts as a nurse, that she could move into management if she wanted to. She could find one job, just one, and actually have a life. She could sleep more than 3 hours a night. She could eat food that wasn't instant ramen and discount bread from the clearance section. She could breathe. The realization was so overwhelming that she had to sit down on the shower floor, the cold towel pressing against her skin, and let herself cry, something she hadn't done in months. The tears came hot and fast, mixing with the cold water, and she let them come because no one was here to see her break, and God knew she'd earned the right to fall apart at least once. By the time she emerged from the bathroom 40 minutes later, she'd made a decision. Not to leave. Not yet anyway, but to demand answers. Real ones. Daniel owed her that much. But when she stepped into the kitchen, freshly showered and dressed in her nurse's scrubs, she found him standing by the window, still shirtless, holding something in his hand. A letter, she realized. Official looking. His face was pale, and his other hand was gripping the edge of the windowsill so tightly his knuckles had turned white. Daniel? She stepped closer, trying to see what he was holding. What is that? He didn't answer immediately. For a long moment, he just stared out at the Manhattan skyline visible between the buildings across the street, at the early morning light starting to paint the sky in shades of gold and amber. When he finally turned to face her, there was something in his expression she'd never seen before, something between shame and resignation, and something else she couldn't quite name. Elena, he said softly, there's something I need to tell you. Something I should have told you a long time ago. The letter was shaking in his hand. What is it? She whispered, though some part of her already knew that whatever came next would change everything. She could feel it in the air between them, heavy and electric, like the moment before a lightning strike. Daniel looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time in months, she saw something like genuine emotion in his eyes. Fear. Regret. And something that might have been love, if love was something that could survive being buried under lies. My family, he began. They're not who I told you they were. Hey there, beautiful souls watching right now. I hope you're having an absolutely amazing day, wherever you're tuning in from. I'd love to know. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment and let me know. And more importantly, are you subscribed yet? Because trust me, you're going to need to be subscribed for where this story is about to go. This is about to get intense. So comment below. Where are you watching from, and have you hit that subscribe button? Elena's heart stopped. My family, Daniel repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. They're not who I told you they were. She watched him unfold the letter with trembling hands. It was thick, expensive paper, the kind that felt substantial, important, the kind that didn't come from bill collectors or landlords. The letterhead at the top read, Kane Family Holdings, Private Correspondence. What do you mean? Elena asked, though her voice sounded distant, like it was coming from someone else's mouth. Your family is an import-export. Your father passed away years ago. Your mother lives in upstate New York with her cats. You told me all of this. I know what I told you. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, and she could see the sweat beading on his forehead despite the morning chill. And I know it was a lie. I know that makes me a piece of shit. I know that now. Elena took a step backward, her mind struggling to catch up with what was happening. This was the moment she realized. This was the moment when everything pivoted. She could feel it in her bones, in the electric charge of the air between them, in the way her body had gone cold despite the warm shower she'd just taken. Start from the beginning, she said carefully. And don't leave anything out. Daniel looked down at the letter in his hands, and for a moment, he seemed to be gathering courage, marshaling his thoughts. Finally, he took a breath and began. My father didn't pass away when I was 12, he said quietly. He passed away 6 months ago. And when he did, I inherited 50% of Kane Holdings, which is... He paused, swallowing hard, which is worth approximately $500 million. The apartment seemed to tilt slightly. Elena reached out and gripped the kitchen counter, needing something solid, something real, something that wouldn't disappear if she blinked. $500 million, she repeated flatly. Yes. And you've been letting me work 4 jobs. Yes. While you sat around this apartment doing absolutely nothing. Yes. His voice cracked on the word. Elena, E. How long have you known? Her voice was surprisingly steady, considering that her entire world was currently imploding. About the inheritance. How long? Daniel hesitated, and that hesitation was answer enough. 6 months, Elena breathed. You've known for 6 months. Since your father died. Since the exact moment when I started taking on the grocery store job because we couldn't make rent. Since I started picking up extra shifts at the clinic. Since I started looking like a ghost in the mirror. She laughed, a sharp, brittle sound that didn't belong to her. How did I not know? Because I made sure you didn't, Daniel said, and there was something in his tone now that wasn't shame or fear. It was guilt, raw and cutting. I intercepted the letters. I didn't answer calls from the family lawyers. I told them to send everything to a P.O. box. I kept it separate, and I kept it from you. Why? The question came out as almost a sob. Why would you do that? He looked at her then, really looked at her, and she could see the anguish in his eyes. Genuine, desperate, the kind of pain that couldn't be faked. Because, he said slowly, I was afraid that if you knew, you'd stay for the money instead of for me. That you'd resent me for the years I'd failed you. That everything between us would be tainted by the fact that I'd been living a lie. He paused, his voice dropping even lower. And because I wasn't ready to face what I'd become. Elena sat down heavily on the bar stool, her legs no longer capable of supporting her weight. She stared at the letter in his hands, at the expensive paper, at the official seal of Kane Family Holdings, and she felt something inside her fracture. Not break, not yet, but fracture, creating 1,000 tiny cracks in her foundation. Show me, she said finally. Show me everything. What you're experiencing right now. That's the moment that changes everything. If you're on the edge of your seat, you need to be subscribed to see where this goes next. Have you hit subscribe yet? Drop a comment right now and tell me, what would you do in Elena's position? The responses blow my mind every time, and I read every single one. Let's talk about this. What Daniel showed her over the next 3 hours was a masterclass in deception. There were letters from the family's private lawyers dating back 6 months, detailed, formal, discussing the probate process, the distribution of assets, the various properties and investments and business holdings that now fell under his name. There were bank statements that made Elena's eyes water, accounts with balances that seemed to have too many zeros, transfers between funds that represented more money than she'd earn in her entire lifetime. There were photographs from his childhood, Daniel at country clubs, Daniel in private school uniforms, Daniel standing next to a man who had to be his father, both of them grinning at some society event that probably cost more than her annual salary. There were also photographs she'd never seen before. Daniel as a teenager, his eyes hollow, standing next to his father in what looked like a hospital room. Daniel at 16, alone, his expression shuttered and dark. And there, tucked in the corner of a leather portfolio, a photograph of a woman Elena recognized. "Is that your mother?" she asked quietly, pointing to the woman in the image. She was beautiful in an austere way, blonde, dressed in designer clothes that probably cost what Elena made in a month. "Yes," Daniel confirmed. "Her name is Victoria Kane. She's difficult, controlling. She wanted to arrange everything about my life, my education, my career, who I married. Everything."
He paused.
She didn't approve when I said I wanted to try building something on my own. She said I was throwing away my legacy. We fought about it constantly. And then one day I just left, told her I was done with the money, done with the family, done with all of it. I moved to the city, got an apartment in a neighborhood she considered beneath her, and I tried to pretend that none of it existed. "You tried to pretend you were normal," Elena said quietly. "I tried to pretend I was good." Daniel's voice broke on the words. "I told myself that I could build a real life, that I could be someone who deserved love, because I'd struggled, because I'd failed, because I understood what it meant to have nothing. But the truth is, I'm a coward. I'm a liar. I took your love and your sacrifice, and I built it on top of a foundation of lies." Elena stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city below. It was fully morning now, the streets crowded with people heading to their jobs, their lives unfolding in the normal way that lives unfolded when you didn't have $500 million hidden in a P.O. box. She thought about the last 6 months, the nights she'd spent on her feet, the exhaustion that had become her constant companion, the way she'd started to resent him in small, accumulating ways that she'd tried not to notice because love was supposed to be bigger than resentment, wasn't it? Love was supposed to transcend everything. But maybe love wasn't supposed to be built on lies. "What changed?" she asked, turning back to face him. "Why are you telling me this now?" Daniel held up the letter that had started this entire conversation. "The lawyers sent this yesterday. My mother is taking legal action to reclaim my inheritance. She's claiming I'm mentally unfit to manage the assets, that I've been in some kind of fugitive state, hiding from my responsibilities. She's got a whole psychiatric evaluation prepared. If she wins, I lose it all, and the money goes back into the family trust." "And if she doesn't win?" Elena asked slowly. "Then I become the sole heir to Kane Holdings. Then I have complete control over $500 million. He looked at her, and she could see the fear in his eyes now, raw and primal. "And then I have to decide what kind of person I want to be." Elena didn't answer immediately. She was thinking about the eviction notice, about the 72 hours ticking away like a countdown to her own personal apocalypse. She was thinking about what it would mean if Daniel actually had the money now, if this wasn't just another lie, another broken promise. Would everything change? Would it fix things between them? Or would it just add another layer of complexity to an already impossible situation? "We need to talk," she said finally, "but not right now. I have to get to work." "Elena, please." "I said not right now, Daniel." Her voice was firm, though her hands were still shaking. "I need time to process this. I need time to think about what this means. And I need you to do something for me." "Anything," he said immediately. "Anything you need." "I need you to call the lawyers," she said. "I need you to stop hiding from your family, stop running, stop building your life on lies. I need you to figure out who you actually are, separate from me, separate from this money, separate from all of it."
"Can you do that?"
Daniel nodded, but Elena could see the doubt in his eyes. And part of her, the part that had been deeply, painfully hurt by his deception, wondered if he was capable of change, or if this was just another lie, another performance, another way of manipulating her into staying. She grabbed her bag and headed for the door without waiting for an answer. The grocery store was the worst shift, it always was. Fluorescent lights, the smell of cleaning products mixed with something vaguely organic and slightly rotten, and customers who seemed to have no concept that retail workers were actual human beings with their own lives, their own struggles, their own capacity to break. "Excuse me, where's the organic spinach?" a woman demanded, interrupting Elena as she was restocking the frozen food section. "Aisle 4, Elena said automatically, not bothering to look up. "Produce section." "You should be more helpful," the woman sniffed. "I'm a paying customer." Elena felt something inside her snap, just a little bit, just enough. "You know what?" she said, turning to face the woman. "I've been on my feet for 18 hours. I've worked 6 hours on my feet at a hospital. I've worked 8 hours cleaning offices, and now I'm here restocking food that I can't afford to buy because I'm too busy working 4 jobs to pay for an apartment I might lose in 72 hours. So, I'm not going to apologize for not being cheerful. I'm not going to pretend that this is some kind of magical retail experience. Aisle 4. Spinach. That's all the help I can give you today." The woman's face turned red, and she stalked away, muttering about complaining to the manager. Elena went back to her restocking, her heart pounding, knowing she probably shouldn't have done that, knowing she probably just gave her manager a reason to fire her. She needed this job, even if it was terrible, even if it paid minimum wage, even if it was slowly destroying her soul. Except, she didn't need this job anymore, did she? If what Daniel said was true, if he really did have $500 million, then she could quit. She could walk out of this store right now and never come back. She could sleep for a week. She could eat actual food, the kind that wasn't marked down at the last possible moment before expiration. She could breathe. The thought was intoxicating, and it terrified her, because it meant she'd have to forgive him. It meant she'd have to accept that the person she'd been in love with had been a lie, that she'd sacrificed 6 months of her life for someone who didn't actually exist. And forgiveness, Elena was learning, was far more complicated than anger. "Okay, I need to pause here because I'm genuinely curious about something. If you were Elena right now, would you walk away from this relationship? Would you accept his apology? Comment below. I'm reading every response. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now is the time. This story is about to take a turn that will absolutely blow your mind. Trust me. By the time Elena's shift ended at 1:47 p.m., she had exactly 13 minutes to get to the clinic across town. She called an Uber, something she almost never did because of the cost, and sat in the back seat with her eyes closed, trying not to think about anything at all. The clinic was a small operation tucked into a basement office on the Lower East Side, run by a woman named Dr. Sarah Chen, who had hired Elena 3 months ago when she desperately needed another income source. Dr. Chen was good people, the kind of doctor who actually cared about her patients, who took time to listen, who treated her nursing staff like human beings instead of automatons. Today, like most days, the clinic was packed. There were people with minor injuries, people with chronic conditions that went untreated because they couldn't afford regular health care, people who came in with problems that were really just symptoms of a larger disease called poverty. Elena moved through her shift on autopilot, taking blood pressures, updating charts, comforting patients who'd waited hours to be seen. It was around 5 p.m. that Drive Chen pulled her aside. "You look like hell," the older woman said bluntly, setting a hand on Elena's shoulder. "Worse than usual, I mean." Elena tried to smile, but it felt like her face was made of wax. "Personal stuff. Personal stuff that's making you consider quitting?" Dr. Chen's dark eyes were sharp, seeing far too much. "Because I can see it in your face. You're done. You're burning out." "I'm not quitting," Elena said automatically, but even as she said it, she wondered if it was true. Could she quit? Should she? "You should," Dr. Chen said quietly. "You should find one good job, just one, and do it well. You have real talent, Elena. I've never seen a nurse with your ability to connect with patients. You could go far if you weren't destroying yourself with 4 different jobs." Elena thought about that for the rest of her shift. She thought about it while she was cleaning up, while she was heading to the subway to get to the hospital for her night shift, while she was sitting in the break room at Metropolitan Hospital, drinking terrible coffee and watching her coworkers go about their evening. She thought about it at 2 a.m. when she was helping a patient in the ICU, a man in his 70s who'd had a stroke, and he grabbed her hand and called her by his daughter's name. She thought about the confusion in his eyes, the way he was trapped between worlds, unable to communicate what he needed. "It's okay," she whispered, squeezing his hand gently. "It's going to be okay." But she wasn't sure if she was talking to him or to herself. By the time she got home at 6:30 a.m., having worked another 16-hour day, Elena was running on fumes and spite and the strange electric energy that comes from complete emotional exhaustion. Daniel was awake. He was sitting at the kitchen table with his laptop open, surrounded by papers and coffee cups, and he looked almost as terrible as she felt. "I called the lawyers," he said immediately, before she could even set her bag down. "I told them I'm coming in today at 2 p.m. I told them I want to understand everything, the inheritance, the legal situation, all of it." "Okay," Elena said carefully. "I also called my mother," he continued. "We're meeting tomorrow. I told her I have some things I need to say to her, and I need her to listen without interrupting."
Okay, Elena, repet.
"And I made a decision," Daniel said, finally looking up from his laptop to meet her eyes. "If I get the inheritance when I get it, assuming I do, I'm setting up a foundation. A nonprofit that helps people like you. People who are working themselves to death just to survive. I want to create a scholarship program for nurses. I want to fund community health clinics. I want to actually do something with the money instead of running from it." Elena stood there, listening to him talk, and she realized something crucial. She didn't know if she believed him. She didn't know if any of this would actually happen, or if he'd get scared again and retreat back into his comfortable lies. But more importantly, she realized she didn't know who she was anymore either. She'd been so focused on surviving, on keeping them afloat, that she'd lost track of her own dreams, her own desires, her own reasons for continuing. She'd become so intertwined with Daniel's failure that she'd forgotten to ask what she actually wanted. "I'm going to take a shower and sleep," she said quietly. "We can talk about this later. But Daniel, don't promise me anything else until you've actually followed through on something." "Okay, so here's my question for you. At what point does love stop being enough?" Comment below and let me know your thoughts, because honestly, the comments on these stories have been incredible. You all have such wisdom and such different perspectives, and I read every single one. And if you haven't subscribed yet, this is your sign. The next part is going to blow your mind. Trust me. Elena slept for 14 hours straight. It was the kind of sleep that felt like drowning, the kind where you lose track of time and space and the difference between dreams and reality. When she finally woke up, disoriented and cotton-mouthed, the apartment was silent, and the light coming through the bedroom window had shifted from afternoon gold to early evening amber. Her phone showed 7 missed calls from Daniel and 3 text messages, each more frantic than the last.
Call me.
"It's important. Elena, please. I need to talk to you. The meeting with the lawyers went badly. I need you." She sat up slowly, her body aching in ways that had become so familiar she barely registered them anymore. Every muscle felt like it had been beaten repeatedly. Her lower back was a constant symphony of pain. Her feet were covered in blisters and calluses that had formed calluses of their own. She called Daniel back. He answered on the first ring, sounding breathless and terrified. "Are you okay?" he asked immediately. "I was starting to get really worried." "You've been asleep since." "Since I got home, yes," Elena interrupted gently. "I needed the sleep, Daniel. I was running on empty." She paused. "You said the meeting with the lawyers went badly?" There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When Daniel finally spoke, his voice sounded different, smaller somehow, defeated in a way she'd never heard before. "My mother came to the meeting," he said quietly. She wasn't supposed to be there. The lawyers called her after I scheduled the appointment. She came with her own legal team, and she brought documentation that... He trailed off, and Elena could hear him taking a shaky breath. She brought proof that I've been mentally unstable. Therapy records from when I was a teenager. Psychiatric evaluations. Letters from doctors saying I'm prone to making impulsive, destructive decisions. Daniel, you were a teenager, Elena said, trying to find the logic in his panic. Lots of teenagers go to therapy. That's what I said, Daniel confirmed. But my mother's lawyer made the argument that my leaving the family, my inability to hold a job, my spiral into poverty while rejecting my family's offers of help, all of it is evidence of an ongoing mental health crisis. They're saying I'm not fit to manage the inheritance. They're claiming I need a conservatorship. Elena felt her chest tighten. A conservatorship. That meant someone else, probably Victoria Kane, would have complete control over Daniel's finances, his assets, his life. What did your lawyer say? She asked. That it's complicated. Daniel laughed bitterly. Apparently, my mother's documentation is extensive. She's been building this case for years. She has medical records, witness statements from friends of the family, a whole psychological profile. He paused. The lawyer said we have a case, but it's going to be expensive. We're looking at 6 figures just for the legal fees. Can you afford that? Elena asked quietly. Not if I don't have access to the inheritance money, Daniel said. And I can't get access to the inheritance money unless I win the case, which I can't do without money to hire the best lawyers. It was a trap, Elena realized. A perfectly constructed legal trap designed to keep Daniel exactly where he'd been for the past 6 months, powerless. I'm coming home, she said, already pulling herself out of bed. We'll figure this out together. But the truth was, she had no idea how to figure anything out anymore. When Elena arrived at the apartment 45 minutes later, she found Daniel pacing back and forth across their living room like a caged animal. He was still in the clothes he'd worn to the lawyer's office. Expensive clothes, she noticed for the first time, the kind of thing he must have borrowed from somewhere because she'd certainly never seen him wear anything that nice before. He stopped pacing when he saw her. I'm sorry, he said immediately. I'm sorry for all of this. I'm sorry that I lied to you, and I'm sorry that now you're stuck dealing with my family's insanity, and I'm sorry that I'm such a complete disaster that I can't even inherit money without fucking it up. Daniel, stop, Elena said, setting down her bag. Self-flagellation isn't going to help us. We need to think strategically. We need to figure out what your options are. She moved to the couch and sat down, gesturing for him to do the same. He did, but immediately he was up again, unable to sit still. I talked to a friend today, he said, still pacing. A guy I knew from college, named James. I haven't heard from him in years, but I saw him at the lawyer's office. He's apparently working for one of the legal firms handling my case. We grabbed coffee after the meeting, and he told me something. What?
Elena prompted.
He told me that my mother has been trying to discredit me for years, Daniel said. Not just now, but since my father died 6 months ago. She's been trying to prove that I'm unstable, that I made poor decisions on purpose, that the whole thing of me rejecting the family and trying to build my own life was actually a symptom of a mental breakdown. He finally stopped pacing and turned to face her. Elena, I think she's been manipulating things behind the scenes. I think she's been orchestrating this entire situation to make sure I never got access to my inheritance. That's... Elena searched for a word that could encompass the enormity of what he was suggesting. That's insane. It is, Daniel agreed. But James said something else. He said that my mother had been meeting with someone regularly, someone who wasn't part of the legal team. Someone she called her fixer. He said they met at high-end restaurants and they always paid in cash, and the conversations were always about me. Elena felt a chill run down her spine. Do you know who this person is? No, Daniel said. But James said he could find out. He said he has a friend in my mother's office who might have access to her calendar, her emails, that kind of thing. That would be illegal, Elena pointed out. I know. Daniel's voice was quiet. I know it would be. But Elena, I'm starting to think that maybe my mother is the one who's unstable. I'm starting to think that maybe this whole thing, her accusations about me, the psychiatric evaluations, all of it, maybe it's not because she actually believes I'm mentally unfit. Maybe it's because she's terrified of losing control. Elena stood up and walked over to him, taking his face in her hands. She forced him to look at her, forced him to see her, forced him to understand that there was at least one person in his life who wasn't trying to manipulate or control him. Listen to me, she said carefully. I don't know your mother. I don't know her motivations or her methods. But I do know that going down this road, hiring people to spy on her, having someone illegally access her emails, that's not going to help your case. That's only going to make you look exactly like the person she's claiming you are. So, what do you suggest? Daniel asked, frustration bleeding through his voice. Just roll over? Let her take everything. I suggest, Elena said slowly, that you tell the truth. All of it. Not the version you've been telling yourself. Not the version your mother is trying to construct, but the actual truth. You left the family because you wanted independence. You took on debt because you were trying to build something on your own. You worked jobs that didn't pay well because you were too proud or too stupid, depending on your perspective, to ask for help. But none of that makes you mentally unfit. None of that makes you incapable of managing your own finances. My mother will argue. Let her argue. Elena interrupted. You have a lawyer for that. But Daniel, if you win this case by doing something illegal or unethical, then you've already lost. Because then you're proving that your mother was right about you all along. Okay, I need to stop for a second because I can see some of you are frustrated with Daniel right now, and honestly, I get it. The comments I see in my videos about situations like this are always so real. What would you do in Elena's position? Would you give him another chance? Would you walk away? Drop a comment. I'm literally reading them all right now, and your perspective could genuinely help someone in a similar situation. And if you haven't subscribed, this is your moment. Because what comes next is going to change everything. I'm not exaggerating. The next morning, Elena woke to find Daniel already awake, sitting at the kitchen table with his laptop open. He had a strange expression on his face, something between shock and revelation. I did something, he said as soon as she entered the room. Elena's stomach clenched. What did you do? I went through all the paperwork from the lawyers, Daniel explained. All the documentation my mother provided about my supposed mental health crisis. And I realized something. He turned his laptop toward her, and she saw documents spread across the screen, psychiatric evaluations, therapy notes, letters from doctors. All of this is real, Daniel continued. I did go to therapy when I was a teenager.
I did have a rough time.
But look at the dates. Look at when these evaluations were done. Elena leaned closer, scanning the documents. The dates were from when Daniel was 15, 16, 17 years old. Recent evaluations were dated just 3 months ago, right after his father's death. Someone forged these, she breathed. Not forged exactly, Daniel said. They're real evaluations, but they're being presented in a misleading way. The old ones are from legitimate treatment I received as a teenager. But the recent ones, Elena, I never agreed to any psychological evaluation 3 months ago. I never saw any of these doctors. These are fabricated documents using my real medical history as a template. Elena sat down slowly. Your mother forged psychiatric evaluations. Or someone on her legal team did, Daniel said. And if we can prove that, if we can show that these recent evaluations are fraudulent, then we have a case. We have actual evidence of misconduct. You need to tell your lawyer immediately, Elena said. I did, Daniel confirmed. I called him this morning. He's reviewing the documents now. He said if what we think is true, then my mother's entire case falls apart. More than that, it opens her up to serious legal liability. She could face fraud charges. Elena's phone buzzed. A text message from an unknown number. Elena Prescott? This is Victoria Kane. We need to talk. I'm sending a car.
Don't tell Daniel.
She stared at the message for a long moment, her mind racing through the implications.
What?
Daniel asked, seeing her expression. What is it? Nothing, Elena said automatically, then caught herself. No more lies. No more deception. Actually, it's something. I just got a text from your mother.
She wants to meet with me.
Alone. Daniel's face went pale. Don't go. I have to, Elena said quietly. Because if I don't, she's going to use that against you somehow. She's going to say I was in on it or that I'm controlling you or something else. But if I go, if I hear what she has to say, maybe I can figure out what she's really after.
Elena.
I'm going, she said firmly. And I'm going to find out exactly what kind of person your mother really is. The car that arrived 30 minutes later was a black town car with tinted windows, the kind of vehicle that screamed old money and subtle power. Elena had showered quickly and changed into her best clothes, a simple black dress that she'd been saving for job interviews, professional but not ostentatious. She told Daniel she was going to work early. She hated lying to him again, but she had a feeling that if he knew she was meeting his mother, he'd try to stop her. And something in her gut told her that this meeting needed to happen. The car took her to a restaurant in Midtown Manhattan that Elena had only seen from the outside before, the kind of place where everything cost 3 figures and the waitstaff were trained to be invisible. Victoria Kane was already seated at a private corner table when Elena arrived, looking exactly like her photographs, blonde, elegant, impeccably dressed, with eyes that were the same gray as Daniel's, but with none of his warmth. Elena, Victoria said, offering a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. Thank you for coming. Can I offer you something to drink? I'm fine, Elena said, sitting down across from her. What do you want? Victoria's smile tightened further.
Direct.
I like that. It suggests you're not entirely under Daniel's influence. I'm not under anyone's influence, Elena said carefully. I'm here because I want to understand what's happening. What's happening, Victoria said slowly, is that my son is being manipulated by people who see him as an easy target. People like you, Elena. People who saw his vulnerability and decided to exploit it. I don't think that's accurate, Elena said, her voice surprisingly steady. I fell in love with Daniel when he was pretending to have nothing. I didn't know about the money. I didn't know about the family. I didn't know any of it. So, if I'm exploiting him, I'm doing a terrible job of it. Victoria picked up her water glass and took a sip, studying Elena over the rim. You didn't know about the money, she repeated. But now you do. And now you're benefiting from it. He hasn't paid any rent in 6 months, has he? The bills are all still in default. But he's not sleeping on the streets. You've been keeping him afloat. I've been doing what you do when you love someone, Elena said quietly. I've been trying to help. No, Victoria said sharply. You've been enabling. And worse, you've been encouraging him to reject his family, his legacy, his entire identity. You've convinced him that he can build something meaningful out of nothing, when the truth is that people like Daniel, people like our entire family, frankly, we were born into something. We have a responsibility. A responsibility to what? Elena asked. To our name, Victoria said. To our legacy. To the empire that my husband built and that Daniel is now trying to destroy by pretending it doesn't matter. Elena realized, in that moment, exactly what Victoria Kane feared. It wasn't that Daniel was mentally unfit to manage money. It wasn't that he was unstable or destructive. What terrified her was that Daniel might actually be happy without her control, without the family legacy, without the obligation to continue the empire. He's your son, Elena said quietly. Not your project. Not your legacy. Your son. Don't you want him to be happy? Victoria's expression hardened. Happiness is a luxury. Family is a responsibility. Family, Elena corrected gently, should be both. Victoria set down her glass with a sharp clink. I came here to offer you money, she said. A substantial amount. $200,000. All I'm asking in return is that you convince Daniel to withdraw his legal challenge and return to accepting the family support. He'll have a living allowance, access to certain family properties, but no direct control of the company or the assets. Elena stared at her. $200,000. That was more money than she'd made in her entire life. That was a house, a future, freedom from the endless cycle of survival.
No, she said.
Victoria blinked, clearly not expecting that response.
I'm sorry.
No, Elena repeated. I won't do it. You can't buy me, Victoria. And more importantly, you shouldn't want to. Because if Daniel loves me, it shouldn't be because I'm helping him escape his family. It should be because we actually care about each other. And if you care about him, if you actually love him the way a mother should love her son, then you should want him to be happy, not controlled. You're naive, Victoria said coldly. Maybe, Elena agreed. But at least I'm honest. She stood up, pushing away from the table. Tell Daniel, Victoria said quietly, that he's throwing away the only chance he has to be part of this family. Once he makes his choice, he won't be welcome back. He'll survive, Elena said. He's stronger than you think he is. When Elena got back to the apartment, she expected Daniel to be anxious, worried, desperate for information. Instead, she found him sitting on the couch with a bottle of expensive champagne, the kind of bottle that probably cost more than her weekly grocery budget, and he was smiling. My lawyer just called, he said as soon as she walked in. The investigation into the forged documents is moving faster than expected. He has a colleague at the medical board who's agreed to look into whether the recent evaluations were actually conducted. And Elena, if they weren't, if we can prove they were forged, my mother's going to face criminal charges. Elena set down her bag and moved toward him slowly, trying to process what this meant. I met with your mother, she said quietly. Daniel's smile faded. What? Why didn't you tell me? She texted me. I didn't want you to try to stop me. Elena sat down next to him. She offered me $200,000 to convince you to drop the case. She watched Daniel's face cycle through shock, betrayal, and finally a deep, weary resignation. Of course she did, he said quietly. That's how she operates. That's always how she's operated. I said no, Elena continued. Daniel looked at her, his gray eyes searching hers. You said no. I said no, Elena confirmed. Because I'm not interested in being bought. And because I think you deserve to win this case the right way. Not by sacrificing who you are, not by compromising your integrity, but by actually standing up for yourself. And I think you're strong enough to do that. I don't feel strong, Daniel said quietly. I know, Elena said. But you are. You've been lying for 6 months, and now you're choosing to tell the truth, even though it's harder and scarier. That's strength. She took the bottle of champagne from his hands and set it aside. Then she took both of his hands in hers. I need to know something, she said carefully. I need to know if you're doing this for the right reasons. Are you fighting your mother because you want to prove something to yourself? Or are you fighting her because you actually want to build a different kind of life? Because those are two very different things. Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, I'm fighting her because I realized that I've spent my whole life running away from something. Either I was running away from her control, or I was running away from the money, or I was running away from responsibility. And I'm tired of running. I want to stop running. I want to figure out who I actually am, separate from all of that. And who is that? Elena asked softly. I don't know yet, Daniel admitted. But I think I want to find out. Okay, this is where it gets real. Victoria Kane is playing for keeps, and Elena is facing a choice that could change everything. But here's what I want to know from you. Was Elena wrong to say no to that money? What would you have done? Drop a comment right now because honestly, the responses to this question have been some of the most thoughtful I've ever seen. You all have such wisdom, and I genuinely read every single one. And if you're still not subscribed, what are you waiting for? This story is about to go off. The legal battle didn't unfold the way anyone expected. 3 days after Elena's meeting with Victoria Kane, Daniel's lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Rebecca Torres, called an emergency meeting. Elena sat next to Daniel in Rebecca's office on the 32nd floor of a Manhattan office building, watching the lawyer arrange documents across her mahogany desk with the precision of someone laying out evidence at a crime scene. Your mother's legal team made a critical mistake, Rebecca said, not bothering with pleasantries. They submitted forged psychiatric evaluations to the court, and they apparently didn't realize that the medical board maintains digital records. We've confirmed that 3 of the 5 recent evaluations were never actually conducted. The doctors listed as having completed the assessments have no record of ever seeing you. What does that mean? Elena asked, even though she had a feeling she already knew. It means, Rebecca said, leaning back in her chair, that your mother, or someone on her legal team operating at her direction, committed fraud. It means the entire conservatorship petition is now compromised. And it means Daniel has grounds not just to win his inheritance case, but to file a countersuit against his mother for fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, and several other charges that carry both civil and criminal penalties. Daniel had gone very still beside her. Elena reached over and took his hand, squeezing gently. What happens next? She asked Rebecca. Next, the lawyer said, is that we contact the district attorney's office. We provide them with the evidence. They decide whether to pursue criminal charges. In the meantime, the conservatorship petition gets withdrawn, and Daniel's access to his inheritance is restored. Just like that, Daniel asked quietly. I get the money back? Just like that, Rebecca confirmed. Barring any complications, you should have access to your accounts within 48 hours. Elena felt something shift inside her chest. Not quite relief, not quite dread, but something in between. Money. $500 million. Suddenly, it was real. Suddenly, it was happening. After the meeting, Daniel and Elena walked through Manhattan in a daze, neither of them quite ready to go back to the apartment and face what this meant. They ended up in Central Park, sitting on a bench overlooking the Bethesda Terrace, watching tourists and locals pass by in the late afternoon sunshine. Are you okay? Elena asked after a long silence. I don't know, Daniel said honestly. I feel like I should be happy. I feel like I should be celebrating. But instead, I just feel guilty. Guilty about what? About my mother, Daniel said. She's going to face criminal charges, Elena. She's going to lose. And I'm going to win, and I'm going to have all the money, and she's going to have nothing but consequences. Elena considered this for a moment. She thought about Victoria Kane's cold eyes, her absolute certainty that she was right, her willingness to forge documents and manipulate her own son for the sake of control. Your mother made her choices, Elena said carefully. You didn't force her to commit fraud. You didn't force her to lie to the court. She did that all on her own. But I knew she was capable of it, Daniel said. Deep down, I've always known. And I still let myself be surprised when she actually did it. That's not your fault, Elena said gently. They sat in silence for a while longer, watching the light change as the sun moved lower in the sky. Elena was acutely aware of the shift happening inside her, the way her perspective was tilting as the reality of Daniel's situation crystallized. He wasn't a struggling artist anymore. He wasn't a man drowning in debt and shame. He was suddenly, irrevocably, one of the wealthiest people in New York. And what did that mean for them? Real talk for a second. This is where so many relationships break down. When the circumstances change completely, when suddenly the thing that was holding you together, struggle, survival, partnership, and hardship, just vanishes. What do you think happens next? Drop a comment and let me know if you think Elena and Daniel can survive this. Because honestly, this is the question I get asked most often, and I want to hear your take. They returned to the apartment to find flowers waiting for them. Dozens of roses in an expensive vase, placed on the kitchen counter. The card read, "I'm sorry. I was wrong."
Can we talk, Mom?
Daniel stared at the flowers for a long time without touching them. "Do you want to talk to her?" Elena asked. "No," Daniel said immediately. "Not right now. Maybe not ever. She tried to destroy me, Elena. Even if she was trying to do it for what she thought were good reasons, she still tried to destroy me." He threw the flowers away. The next 48 hours passed in a strange blur of anticipation and anxiety. Rebecca Torres called early Friday morning to confirm that Daniel's access to his inheritance had been fully restored. His bank accounts were now active. He could access the family properties whenever he wanted. He was officially and legally in complete control of $500 million. Daniel listened to Rebecca's explanation with growing detachment. When he hung up the phone, he turned to Elena with an expression she couldn't quite read.
We could move, he said.
"We could find an apartment anywhere in the city. Upper West Side, Brooklyn, wherever you want. We could actually have nice things. We could actually have a life that doesn't revolve around survival." "Okay," Elena said carefully. "I know that should make me happy," Daniel continued. "I know that logically, this is what I wanted. Freedom, money, the ability to build something. But instead, I just feel empty. I feel like I've been so focused on fighting my mother and proving something to myself that I forgot to actually think about what comes next." Elena sat down on the couch and patted the cushion next to her.
Daniel sat and she took his hand.
"What do you want?" she asked. "Not what your mother wants, not what society tells you should want. What do you actually want?" "I want to make a real difference," Daniel said slowly. "I want to take this money and actually use it for something meaningful. I told you about wanting to start a foundation, remember? But I want to do more than that. I want to change systems. I want to help people like you, like your coworkers at the hospital, like the patients at the clinic, people who are working themselves to death because they live in a system that's fundamentally broken." "That's a big goal," Elena said. "It's an impossible goal," Daniel corrected. "But I want to try. I want to actually try, instead of just talking about it." Elena felt something warm and hopeful bloom inside her chest. This was the Daniel she'd fallen in love with. Not the lying version, not the broken version, but the version that wanted to build something meaningful, that believed he could make a difference. "Then, that's what we'll do," she said. "We'll figure it out together." But even as she said it, she felt the fissures starting to form. Because the reality of Daniel's money began to intrude on their lives in ways Elena hadn't anticipated. 3 days after his accounts were restored, Daniel wanted to hire someone to clean the apartment. Elena, who had been doing the cleaning herself for 6 months, fitting it in between jobs, collapsing onto the floor in exhaustion, said it was unnecessary.
"We can afford it," Daniel said.
"We can afford it 1,000 times over." "But I can do it," Elena protested. "You're working yourself to death," Daniel said gently. "Let me help. Let me actually contribute something."
So they hired a cleaning service.
And Elena felt displaced in her own home, watching someone else move through the apartment, organizing their things, cleaning their spaces. It wasn't a bad feeling exactly, but it was an unfamiliar one. For so long, she'd been the one holding things together. Now she was just there. Then came the question of her jobs. Elena had gone back to working 4 jobs after meeting with Victoria Kane, a visceral reaction, a way of proving to herself that she hadn't been tempted by the money, that she was still the strong, independent person she'd always been. But maintaining 4 jobs while Daniel was dealing with the legal aftermath of his inheritance became increasingly difficult. One night, exhausted from a double shift at the hospital and a 2-hour stint at the grocery store, Elena came home to find Daniel waiting for her with dinner on the table, something he'd ordered from a restaurant she couldn't afford to eat it on her own. "You need to quit the grocery store job," he said as soon as she walked in the door. "Actually, you need to quit all of them except the hospital. And even that, Elena, you don't have to work at all anymore if you don't want to." I want to, Elena said, even though they both knew it wasn't entirely true. She wanted to work, but not because she enjoyed it. She wanted to work because it was familiar, because it made her feel useful, because the alternative was to acknowledge how completely her life had shifted. Okay, Daniel said carefully. But we need to talk about money. About what comes next. About what we're going to do with all of this. Elena sat down at the table, looking at the expensive food that she was too tired to eat. What do you want to do? I want to set up the foundation I mentioned, Daniel said. I want to hire a team to research healthcare policy, education equity, housing reform. I want to actually build something. But Elena, I can't do that if I'm not 100% focused on it. And I can't focus on it if I'm worried about you working yourself to death. So, what are you suggesting? Elena asked carefully. I'm suggesting, Daniel said slowly, that you become my business partner.
Full-time.
We start the foundation together. We build it together. We make decisions together about how to use the money. Elena felt something twist inside her chest. It was a generous offer. It was a beautiful offer. It was also terrifying, because it meant becoming dependent on him in a different way. It meant accepting his money, his vision, his resources. It meant no longer being separate, no longer being able to point to her jobs and say, I did this on my own. I need time to think about it, she said. Of course, Daniel said. Take all the time you need. But she could see the hurt in his eyes, the confusion that his offer of partnership had been met with hesitation instead of joy. Over the next week, Elena made a decision that surprised even herself. She quit 3 of her 4 jobs. She kept only the hospital position, but negotiated to work fewer hours. And then, reluctantly, she agreed to meet with Daniel about setting up the foundation. They hired a consultant, a woman named Priya, who had experience with nonprofit startups. She walked them through the process, establishing a mission, creating a board of directors, setting up the tax structure, developing a strategy for how to deploy the money in a way that would actually create systemic change. It was fascinating work. It was important work. And slowly, almost despite herself, Elena found herself getting invested in it. But the fracture was still there. One evening, about 2 weeks after Daniel's legal victory, Elena came home to find him on the phone with someone. His tone was careful, measured, professional. I understand your concerns, he was saying. But I think if you actually look at the data, you'll see that the approach we're suggesting is more effective than the traditional model. Yes, I'm aware that I don't have a background in healthcare policy. That's precisely why I've hired people who do. He saw Elena come in and waved her over. She set down her bag and sat on the edge of the couch, listening. Thank you for your time, Daniel said finally. I look forward to our continued discussions. He hung up the phone and turned to her. That was Dr. Atkinson from Columbia Medical School. We're trying to get him to consult on a project that aims to increase access to healthcare in underserved communities. How did it go? Elena asked. He was skeptical, Daniel said. He seemed to think that because I don't have a medical background, I'm not qualified to have opinions about healthcare policy. Are you? Elena asked gently. Am I what? Qualified to have opinions about healthcare policy? Daniel was quiet for a moment. I'm qualified because I have the resources to implement ideas. I have the money to fund research and programs. I have the ability to actually make things happen. But do you have the knowledge?
Elena said.
Do you have the experience? Or are you just going to hire people who do, and then try to direct them? I thought you wanted me to use the money to make a difference, Daniel said, and there was an edge to his voice now. I do, Elena said. But I want you to make a difference in a way that's authentic. That's actually based on understanding the problem, not just throwing money at it. That's not fair, Daniel said. That's not a realistic expectation. Nobody has complete expertise in everything. I know, Elena said quietly. But there's a difference between admitting you don't have expertise and pretending that having money is a substitute for it. They didn't argue exactly, But there was a tension between them that hadn't existed before, a friction that came from the fundamental shift in their circumstances. Elena was noticing things about Daniel now that she hadn't noticed before. She was noticing the way he assumed he should be in charge of decisions. She was noticing the way he seemed to think that money could solve any problem. She was noticing that he was, in many ways, still very much Victoria Kane's son. And Daniel, Elena suspected, was noticing that Elena wasn't as impressed by him now that he had money. Okay, so here's what I'm genuinely curious about. Do you think money can ruin a good relationship? Drop a comment because this is something I think about constantly. I've seen so many couples implode the moment their circumstances change, and I want to understand why. Is it the money itself? Or is it what the money reveals about people? And seriously, if you haven't subscribed yet, you need to. The next part is where everything changes. I'm not exaggerating. 3 weeks into Daniel's legal victory, Elena received a call from Dr. Chun at the clinic. "We have a situation," Dr. Chun said, without preamble. "One of our main funding sources just pulled out. They were providing about 40% of our operating budget. Without it, I might have to close the clinic." Elena's chest tightened. The clinic served some of the most vulnerable patients in Manhattan, people without insurance, people in crisis, people like she used to be, living on the edge of survival. "How much do you need?" Elena asked. "To keep operating for the next year?" "About $200,000, Dr. Chin said. "It's a lot of money, Elena. It's probably more than I have any right to ask for. But I thought you might know someone. I thought you might have connections now that could help." After hanging up with Dr. Chin, Elena sat for a long time, staring at her phone. She could ask Daniel for the money. $200,000 was nothing to him now. It was literally less than he probably made in a day from his investments. He'd probably be happy to help. He'd probably see it as exactly the kind of meaningful contribution to society that he claimed to want to make. But asking him felt like crossing a line. It felt like admitting that the only way she could help people now was through him, through his money, through his resources. She decided to handle it herself. She met with Dr. Chun, and they discussed options. Dr. Chun had some connections, some wealthy donors who sometimes contributed. They could reach out, make a case, hope for the best. It would take time, and it might not be enough, but it was a start. Elena was heading home after the meeting when her phone rang. It was Rebecca Torres, Daniel's lawyer. "I have some news," Rebecca said. "The district attorney is moving forward with charges against your mother, Daniel's mother. Victoria Kane is being charged with fraud, filing false documents, and conspiracy. It's going to be quite public. Are you prepared for that?" "I'll tell Daniel," Elena said. "Also," Rebecca continued, "Victoria is requesting a meeting with Daniel. She says she wants to discuss a settlement." "What kind of settlement?" Elena asked. "The kind where she probably offers him money to not press charges, or where she tries to negotiate some kind of plea deal," Rebecca said. "I'd advise Daniel not to meet with her without legal representation. In fact, I'd advise him not to meet with her at all." When Elena told Daniel about the charges and Victoria's request for a meeting, he was quiet for a long time. "I'm going to meet with her," he said finally. "Daniel, no," Elena protested. "That's exactly what your lawyer said not to do." "I know," Daniel said. "But she's still my mother, Elena. I owe her at least a conversation." "You don't owe her anything," Elena said, her voice sharp. "She tried to destroy you. And I'm about to destroy her," Daniel said quietly. "Don't I at least owe her the chance to explain herself? Don't I owe her the chance to look her son in the eye and explain why she did what she did?" Elena wanted to argue, but she could see in his expression that his mind was already made up. The meeting with Victoria took place on a Saturday morning at a neutral location, a coffee shop in Tribeca that was far enough from either of their homes to feel safe. Elena waited outside, giving them privacy, though Daniel had wanted her to be there. "I need to do this alone," he'd told her. "But I want you waiting. I want to know that you're here, that I have somewhere to come back to after it's over. So Elena sat on a bench across the street from the coffee shop, pretending to read a book while actually watching the entrance. When Daniel emerged 45 minutes later, he looked gutted. She stood up and went to him immediately, taking his face in her hands, studying his expression for signs of what had happened. "She wants me to forgive her," Daniel said quietly. "She wants me to convince the district attorney to drop the charges. And in exchange, she's offering to withdraw from the company entirely, to cede all control to me, to just disappear from my life." "What did you tell her?" Elena asked. "I told her I couldn't do that," Daniel said. "I told her that forgiving her and dropping charges are two different things. I told her that I can eventually forgive her, not for her sake, but for mine, so I don't carry around this anger forever. But I told her that facing consequences for what she did is part of that process." "Good," Elena said, pulling him close. "She cried," Daniel said into her hair. "My mother sat in a coffee shop in Tribeca and cried, and I didn't feel anything. That's what scared me most. I didn't feel anything except tired. Okay, I need to ask you something real. At what point does forgiveness become enabling? What's your take? Drop a comment right now because I think this is one of the most important questions we can ask about love, family, and boundaries. And seriously, if you haven't subscribed, this is it. The next part is where everything comes to a head. The midpoint revelation that changes everything. I cannot stress this enough. It started with a small inconsistency. Elena was going through foundation paperwork with Priya, the consultant they'd hired, when she noticed something odd in the financial records. A transfer from Daniel's primary account, a large one, approximately $2 million, had been made to an unknown entity 3 weeks earlier. The transaction was labeled only as personal discretionary transfer. "Do you know what this is?" Elena asked Priya, pointing to the line item. Priya frowned, studying the document. "I'd have to check with Daniel's financial advisor. It might be a personal investment, or it could be something he set up before we started working together. You should ask him about it." Elena nodded, but something in her chest tightened. She'd been so caught up in the work of building the foundation, in trying to figure out how to make meaningful change in the world, that she hadn't been paying attention to the actual money. She hadn't realized that she was still, in many ways, in the dark about Daniel's finances. That evening, she asked him casually over dinner. "Oh, that," Daniel said, setting down his fork. "That was something I did a few weeks ago, before I knew we were going to work on the foundation together." "What is it?"
Elena said.
"It's a personal investment," Daniel said. "Something that should yield significant returns over the next 5 to 10 years. "What kind of investment?"
Elena persisted.
Daniel was quiet for a moment. "Elena, do we really need to get into this? I thought we agreed that I would handle the foundation finances and I would handle personal investments separately." "We never explicitly agreed to that," Elena said carefully. "And I'm not trying to pry into your personal finances, Daniel. I'm just curious about what you're doing with your money. Is that unreasonable?" "No," Daniel admitted. "You're right. I'm sorry. I'm being evasive, and that's not fair to you." He set down his fork and looked at her directly. "The investment is in real estate. I'm buying a building in Harlem. The plan is to convert it into affordable housing. I wanted to do something concrete, something that would make an immediate difference. So I bought the building outright and hired developers to renovate it into apartments that would be genuinely affordable for people like, well, people like you were." Elena felt the tension in her chest ease. "That's incredible, Daniel. That's exactly the kind of thing we were talking about." "I know," Daniel said. "But I didn't tell you because I wasn't sure it would work out. I wasn't sure it was the right move. And part of me—" He paused. "Part of me wanted to have done something good without needing your validation or input." There it was. The fracture, visible now, no longer invisible. "I'm not asking for your validation," Elena said quietly. "I'm asking you to include me in your decisions. We're supposed to be partners, remember? Isn't that what we said when we decided to work on the foundation together? Yes, Daniel said. You're right.
I'm sorry.
I'll do better. But Elena could see the resistance in his expression. She could see the part of him that wanted to be the savior, the one who made decisions, the one who implemented change. She could see that having money had awakened something in him, not greed exactly, but a certain confidence that he was right, that his resources meant his vision was the correct one. It was Victoria Kane's blood showing through. The next morning, Elena received a call from a number she didn't recognize. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Is this Elena Prescott? A woman's voice asked. Yes, Elena said cautiously. Who is this? My name is Catherine Stone. I'm a journalist with the New York Times. I'm writing a story about the Kane family, and I understand you've been involved with Daniel Kane for approximately 6 months now. I was wondering if you'd be willing to go on record about your relationship with him. Elena's stomach dropped. I don't think that's appropriate. I understand your hesitation, Catherine said smoothly. But I think it's important that people understand the full story of what happened. The fraud charges against Victoria Kane, the hidden inheritance, the way Daniel has been living. The public deserves to know. The public doesn't deserve to know about our personal life, Elena said sharply. I'm not interested in speaking with you. She hung up before Catherine could respond. When she told Daniel about the call, his face went pale. She called me yesterday, he admitted. I told her no, obviously. But she said she was going to run the story anyway, and that she'd prefer to have our side of things. What's our side of things? Elena asked. What story is she telling? That's the problem, Daniel said. I don't know. She wouldn't say. She just kept asking questions about my relationship with my mother, about why I went into debt, about how I met you. Elena felt something cold crawl down her spine. What did you tell her? Nothing, Daniel said. I hung up on her, just like you did. But Elena, she's a serious journalist. If she's investigating the story, it means she thinks there's something worth investigating.
He was right.
The New York Times didn't just randomly call people about their personal lives. Catherine Stone must have a lead on something, some angle that made the story worth pursuing. 3 days later, the article dropped. Elena found it through Google Alerts, a notification that mentioned both her name and Daniel's in the context of a New York Times investigation. The headline was, Heir to $500 million fortune hides wealth while girlfriend works 4 jobs. What the Kane family scandal reveals about wealth, privilege, and deception. The article was long, detailed, and ruthlessly thorough. Catherine Stone had done her homework. She'd talked to Daniel's college friends who confirmed he'd told them his family was in decline. She'd talked to Daniel's landlord, who confirmed the eviction notice. She talked to people from the grocery store where Elena worked who described her as exhausted, desperate, a woman working herself to death. And then came the part that made Elena's blood run cold. According to sources close to the Kane family, Daniel Kane's decision to hide his inheritance may not have been a simple case of youthful rebellion against family wealth. Instead, it appears to have been part of a broader pattern of deception and manipulation. Daniel wanted to experience what it was like to be normal, one source told us. He wanted to see if he could build a relationship based on true connection rather than money. But the problem was, he was building that relationship on lies. Most troublingly, our investigation uncovered evidence that Daniel Kane may have deliberately sought out Elena Prescott, a woman from a lower socioeconomic background, precisely because he believed she would be more grateful, more compliant, less likely to challenge his worldview. He saw her as a project, the source said. A way to prove to himself that he was a good person despite his family's wealth. Elena read those words 3 times before they actually penetrated her consciousness. A project. He saw her as a project. She was sitting at the kitchen table when Daniel came home from a meeting with his financial advisor. He took one look at her face and immediately went to the laptop, pulling up the article. She watched his expression change as he read, shock, then anger, then a kind of desperate confusion. This isn't true, he said immediately. Elena, none of this is true. I wasn't looking for you specifically. I didn't see you as a project. Then who told the journalist that? Elena asked quietly. I don't know, Daniel said. It could be my mother, it could be someone from the legal team, it could be… Someone who knows you very well, Elena interrupted. Someone who knows enough about your psychology to make this accusation ring true. Someone who understands exactly how to hurt me. Daniel reached for her hand, but she pulled away. I need to ask you something, Elena said, and I need you to be completely honest with me. When we first met, were you deliberately seeking out someone who is economically vulnerable? Were you deliberately trying to recreate some kind of authentic relationship by lying to someone who is already struggling? No, Daniel said immediately.
Elena, no.
That's not what happened. But could you see how someone might think that?
Elena present.
Could you see how, from the outside, it might look like I was exactly the kind of person you target? Someone desperate enough to work 4 jobs, someone grateful enough not to ask too many questions, someone dependent enough on you that she'd never leave even when she discovered the truth. I didn't target you, Daniel said, his voice becoming increasingly desperate. I met you at the clinic. You were there as a nurse. I was there as a patient, which was another lie, by the way, because I wasn't actually sick, I was just scared, and I needed someone to help me feel less alone. And then you were kind to me, and I fell in love with you, and yes, maybe on some level I was taking advantage of your kindness. But I wasn't deliberately manipulating you into becoming my project. Elena stood up and walked away from him, moving to the window. Outside, the city was going about its business. People working, building, struggling, surviving. People like she used to be, before Daniel Kane had entered her life and made everything complicated. I've been thinking about something, she said quietly. About the 6 months that I worked 4 jobs. About the way you let me sacrifice everything while you sat on information that would have changed everything. And I keep asking myself, did you do that because you were selfish? Or did you do that because you needed to feel like you were connected to someone who was actually struggling? Did you need me to be suffering so you could feel like your love was real? That's not fair, Daniel said, his voice cracking. Isn't it? Elena turned to face him. The journalist said that I was a project. That I was a way for you to prove to yourself that you're a good person despite your family's wealth. And honestly, Daniel, I'm not sure she's wrong.
Wait.
Stop. I need to address something with you guys right now. This moment right here? This is where relationships either break or transform. What do you think Elena should do? Should she leave? Should she stay and fight for the relationship? Drop a comment because I genuinely believe that the way we handle this question determines the trajectory of our lives. I'm reading every response, and your perspectives are shaping how this story evolves. And if you're not subscribed yet, my God, subscribe now. You're at the midpoint and nothing is resolved. Everything is falling apart. The next part is devastating and then it's going to get better and then it's going to get real. They didn't have a dramatic fight. Instead, they had something worse, a long, exhausting conversation that lasted until 3 a.m, during which Daniel tried to explain his motivations and Elena tried to figure out if what she was hearing was the truth or just another version of the story he'd been telling himself. When I met you, Daniel said at one point, I was a broken person hiding a massive lie. And you were the first person in my entire life who treated me like I was worth something anyway. You didn't know about the money. You didn't know about the family. You just saw me, this sad, broken guy, and you decided I was worth loving. Do you understand what that meant to me? I understand what it meant to you, Elena said quietly. What I don't understand is how you repaid that love by lying to me. I know, Daniel said. I know I lied, and I know that was wrong. But Elena, I was terrified. I was terrified that if you knew the truth, everything would change. That you'd become someone different. That the love between us would be infected by the knowledge of the money. So, you decided the love should be infected by lies instead, Elena said. They sat in that terrible, hollow silence for a long time. Finally, Daniel said, I want to fix this. I want to fix us.
What do you need from me?
Elena had been asking herself the same question for hours. What did she need? She needed to trust him again, but she wasn't sure that was possible. She needed to know that he saw her as a person and not a project, but how could she ever be certain of that? She needed to believe that their relationship was real, but the foundation it had been built on was lies. I don't know, she said finally. I don't know if we can come back from this, Daniel. I don't know if we can ever be what we were. We don't have to be what we were, Daniel said. We can be something different, something better. Or something worse, Elena said. We could be something much worse. The next morning, Elena called in sick to work. She couldn't face the hospital, couldn't face her coworkers, couldn't face the reality of her own life right now. Instead, she spent the day walking through the city, thinking about nothing and everything simultaneously. She ended up at Dr. Chen's clinic around 3 p.m. Dr. Chen took one look at her and ushered her into her office, closing the door behind her. She didn't ask what was wrong. She just waited for Elena to explain. Do you ever regret it? Elena asked abruptly. Working in medicine? Dedicating your life to helping people? Never, Dr. Chen said without hesitation. Why? Because I'm starting to wonder if I ever actually chose this, Elena said. I'm starting to wonder if I just fell into it, nursing, the clinic, all of it because I didn't know how to say no. Because I was too desperate, too dependent, too grateful for any scrap of attention or validation. Elena, Dr. Chen said gently, what's going on? Elena told her everything. About Daniel's inheritance, about the article, about the accusation that she was a project, about her fear that their entire relationship had been built on manipulation and lies. Dr. Chen listened without interrupting. When Elena finally finished, the older woman was quiet for a long moment. Can I tell you what I see? Dr. Chen asked.
Elena nodded.
I see a woman who is incredibly skilled at her work. I see a woman who cares deeply about people, who pushes herself to be better, who refuses to accept anything less than excellence from herself. And I see a woman who's been so focused on surviving that she's forgotten to ask herself what she actually wants. What do you mean? Elena asked. I mean, Dr. Chen said carefully, that whether or not Daniel's motivations were pure, you made a choice. You chose to work 4 jobs. You chose to sacrifice. You chose to love him. And yes, he lied to you. That was wrong. But that doesn't negate your agency in this situation. You're not a victim, Elena. You're a person who made choices, and now you have to decide what choices to make next. The choice to leave him? Elena asked. The choice to do whatever is best for you, Dr. Chen corrected. That might be leaving. That might be staying. That might be something in between. But whatever you choose, it needs to be your choice. Not his. Not your fear. Not your gratitude or your guilt. Your choice. Elena sat with that for the rest of the day. By the time she got back to the apartment, she'd made a decision. She wasn't leaving Daniel, but she wasn't staying the way she'd been either. She was going to demand something she hadn't demanded before, the truth, the whole truth, and the space to figure out who she was separate from him. Daniel was waiting for her when she came home. He'd cooked dinner, actually cooked, not ordered, and he looked like he hadn't slept. I've been thinking, Elena said, sitting down across from him, about what I need from you. And what I need is for us to slow down. I need for us to stop building the foundation, stop making big plans, stop trying to fix the world for a minute, and just focus on fixing us. Okay, Daniel said immediately. Whatever you need. I need for you to be honest about why you really didn't tell me about the money, Elena continued. I need for you to actually examine whether the journalist was right about your motivations. And I need for you to understand that if I decide I can't forgive you, that doesn't make me ungrateful or cruel. It just makes me someone who has to protect herself.
I understand, Daniel said.
And I need something else, Elena said. I need to quit the foundation. I need to work with Dr. Chun at the clinic. I need to have something that's mine, that I built on my own, that's separate from you and your money and your family drama. Okay, Daniel said. You keep saying okay, Elena said. But I need you to actually think about this. I need you to understand what I'm asking for. I do understand, Daniel said. You're asking for space. You're asking for autonomy. You're asking for me to stop treating everything, including you, like something that can be solved with money and good intentions. Yes, Elena said.
Exactly that.
Then the answer is yes, Daniel said. To all of it. But as they ate the dinner he'd cooked, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that they were still performing for each other, still telling the story of who they wanted to be rather than who they actually were. The real reckoning, she suspected, was still to come. Okay, I need to know. Do you think Elena is making the right choice? Should she leave Daniel? Should she give the relationship another chance? This is literally keeping me up at night. Drop a comment right now and tell me what you would do, because honestly, the comments on this story have been some of the most thoughtful I've ever received. Your wisdom, your empathy, your willingness to engage with these complicated questions, it means everything. And seriously, if you're not subscribed yet, what are you doing? The next part is the darkest hour, and it's brutal. Then we get the turning point and the climax and the resolution. This is the home stretch, and you do not want to miss it. What did you think of the midpoint revelation? Tell me in the comments. The separation wasn't dramatic or announced. It just happened gradually, the way most important things fall apart, not with a bang but with 1,000 small withdrawals. Elena moved her things into a studio apartment in Washington Heights that Dr. Chin helped her find. It was small, barely enough room for a bed and a desk, but it was hers. The rent was affordable on her clinic salary alone. She didn't need Daniel's money. She didn't need his permission. She didn't need anything from him except distance and time. Daniel didn't fight it. He accepted the separation with a quiet resignation that somehow hurt more than if he'd tried to convince her to stay. I understand, he told her when she was packing her clothes. I know I broke something that can't be fixed. It can be fixed, Elena said, though she wasn't sure if she believed it. It just can't be fixed right now. We both need space to figure out who we are without each other. But the truth, which Elena didn't say out loud, was that she wasn't sure there was anything left to fix. She wasn't sure that their relationship had ever been real enough to deserve a second chance. For 3 weeks, Elena existed in a strange state of limbo. She worked at the clinic, living on a salary that was barely enough to cover rent and food. She'd quit the hospital position, quit the grocery store, quit all the survival jobs that had defined her existence for so long. Now she had just one job, one meaningful job, and time to breathe. It should have felt like freedom. Instead, it felt like floating. She threw herself into her work at the clinic with desperate intensity. She took on extra shifts. She stayed late to help Dr. Chun with administrative tasks. She volunteered for the most difficult cases, the patients who were the most vulnerable, the most broken, the most in need of help. And then, on a Tuesday evening when she was working late, one of those patients changed everything. His name was James Rothman, and he came in with a wound that looked like it had been infected for weeks. He was a homeless man in his 50s, missing most of his teeth, his clothes held together with duct tape and prayer. Elena cleaned and bandaged his wound, talked to him gently about infection and antibiotics, and the importance of keeping it clean. You know, James said as she worked, I see you in here all the time. You've got this look on your face like you're trying to fix the whole world by yourself. Elena laughed, but there was no humor in it. I'm not trying to fix the world. I'm just trying to help where I can. It's the same thing, James said. And I'm telling you, it's going to destroy you. I've seen it happen to nurses before. They come in all idealistic, all ready to save everybody, and then the world just keeps being broken, and they can't fix it, so eventually they break too. That's depressing, Elena said. It's honest, James said. So, here's my advice. Pick your battles. Don't try to save
everybody.
Just save the ones you can actually save. After James left, Elena sat in the break room for a long time, thinking about his words. That night, she couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the clinic, about Dr. Chin, about the fact that no matter how hard they worked, there would always be more patients, more needs, more suffering than they had resources to address. She kept thinking about James's warning, that trying to fix everything would destroy her. She kept thinking about Daniel. Here's a question that's been eating at me. Is it possible to help people without sacrificing yourself in the process? Drop a comment because this is something I genuinely struggle with, and I want to hear how you navigate this. How do you give without giving everything? How do you care without burning out? And if you haven't subscribed, now is literally the moment. We're in the darkest hour, and things are about to get worse before they get better. The next morning, Elena received a call from Rebecca Torres, Daniel's lawyer. "I'm calling with some information you should probably know," Rebecca said without preamble. "Victoria Kane has decided to cooperate with federal prosecutors. She's agreed to plead guilty to the fraud charges in exchange for a reduced sentence and immunity from some of the other potential charges." "Okay," Elena said carefully. "What does that mean for Daniel?" "It means the case is essentially closed," Rebecca said. "Daniel wins. His inheritance is secure. There won't be a trial." "That's good news," Elena said. "It should be," Rebecca agreed. "But Daniel doesn't seem to think so. He's been in a dark place this past week. He fired Priya and shut down work on the foundation. He's just sitting in the apartment, not returning calls, not eating. I'm concerned about him." After hanging up with Rebecca, Elena sat for a long time, staring at her phone. She told herself she didn't care. She told herself Daniel had made his own choices, and now he had to live with them. She told herself that his well-being wasn't her responsibility anymore. But she didn't believe any of it. She called Daniel. He didn't answer. She tried again. Still no answer. By the fourth attempt, she was pulling on her jacket and heading for the subway. The apartment they'd shared felt frozen in time. The flowers that Victoria had sent were still in the trash, withered and brown. The dishes from the dinner Daniel had cooked for Elena were still on the table, unwashed. The laptop that they'd used to research the foundation was closed on the couch, gathering dust. Daniel was sitting in the dark bedroom, on the floor, with his back against the wall. He was still in the clothes he'd apparently been wearing for days, a t-shirt with stains on it, boxers, no socks. He looked like he'd aged 10 years since Elena had last seen him. "Daniel," she said softly, moving to sit beside him. "What are you doing?" "Waiting," he said quietly. "For what?" "For the moment when this all falls apart," Daniel said. "For the moment when I realized that winning, having the money, having the power, having the legal victory wasn't what I actually wanted." Elena didn't respond immediately. She sat next to him in the darkness, breathing in the stale air of a room that hadn't been opened in days. "I called my mother," Daniel said eventually. "After Rebecca told me she was cooperating with prosecutors. I wanted to understand why she decided to plead guilty. And you know what she told me?"
Elena waited.
"She told me that she'd been trying to prove that I was broken so that she could save me from myself," Daniel said. "She actually believed, that if I was declared mentally unfit, the family would take over management of my life. And then eventually, after I'd recovered, I would understand how to properly manage the family wealth and the family legacy. She thought she was helping me." "Was she?" Elena asked gently. "No," Daniel said. "She was just trying to control me. But the terrifying part is that I understand how she got there. I understand the logic that led her to believe that control equals love." He turned to look at Elena for the first time since she'd arrived. "And I'm terrified that I'm doing the same thing," he said quietly. "That I'm telling myself I'm trying to help people, trying to build something meaningful, when really I'm just trying to buy absolution for my privilege. I'm trying to control the narrative of who I am by controlling how much good I do." "Daniel." "Don't," he interrupted. "Don't make excuses for me. Don't try to make this better. I need to sit with this." I need to understand what I've become. You've become a person who made mistakes, Elena said carefully. You've become a person who lied and manipulated and hurt someone you loved. But you're also becoming a person who's trying to own that, who's trying to understand it, who's trying to change. Is that enough? Daniel asked. Can that ever be enough to make up for what I did to you? Elena didn't answer. Because the truth was, she didn't know. She didn't know if forgiveness was possible when the fundamental trust had been shattered. She didn't know if love could survive the revelation that it had been built on lies. What she did know was that Daniel needed help, and she couldn't give it to him by staying. I'm going to call Rebecca, Elena said, standing up. I'm going to tell her that you need a therapist. A real one, not the kind your mother was paying to write false evaluations. Someone who can actually help you figure out who you are and what you want. Elena waited, but she was already moving toward the door. She didn't see Daniel for 2 weeks after that. She focused on work, on the clinic, on the patients who needed her. She helped Dr. Chen apply for grants to expand the clinic's operations. She trained new staff members. She took on complicated cases and difficult patients, threw herself into the work with the desperation of someone trying to outrun her own thoughts. And then one evening, when she was closing up the clinic, Dr. Chen called her into her office. I need to tell you something, Dr. Chen said, gesturing for Elena to sit. Something that's going to be difficult to hear. Elena's stomach clenched. Okay. We got a donation today, Dr. Chen continued. A very large donation. $50 million, set up as a permanent endowment to fund the clinic's operations indefinitely. And it came from an anonymous source through a series of trusts and shell corporations. But Rebecca Torres, Daniel's lawyer, confirmed that it came from Daniel Kane. Elena felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. He can't do that, Elena said immediately. He can't buy his way into my life, Dr. Chen. He can't use money to fix things. I know, Dr. Chen said gently. And I told Rebecca that we need to discuss with you before we accept the donation. But Elena, I also need you to understand something else. What? Daniel didn't do this to win you back, Dr. Chen said. He did this because it's the right thing to do. This clinic helps hundreds of people every year. With this endowment, we could expand our hours, hire more staff, open satellite locations in other neighborhoods. We could genuinely transform how we deliver healthcare to this community. But nothing, Dr. Chen interrupted. The question isn't whether Daniel's motivations are pure. The question is whether you're going to let your anger at him prevent this clinic from doing the good work it's capable of doing. Elena stood up, too agitated to sit. That's not fair. It's not, Dr. Chen agreed. It's also true. Okay, this is the moment where I need to pause and ask you something crucial. Can you accept help from someone who hurt you? Can you benefit from their generosity without it feeling like they're manipulating you again? Drop a comment because I genuinely think this is one of the most complicated questions in human relationships. And if you haven't subscribed, my God, where are you? We are deep in the darkest hour, and the next part is going to be the turning point. Subscribe right now because I cannot stress enough how important the next few parts are. Elena called Daniel that night. You can't do that, she said immediately, not bothering with hellos. You can't just donate $50 million to the clinic to prove something to me. I know, Daniel said quietly. I'm not trying to prove anything, Elena. I'm trying to do the right thing. But how do I know that's true? Elena asked, her voice rising. How do I know this isn't just another manipulation? Another way of trying to control me by making me indebted to you? You don't, Daniel said simply. That's the problem. I broke your trust, and now you don't have any way of knowing my motivations. Everything I do, you're going to interpret through the lens of what I did to you. And I deserve that. I deserve to have every action questioned, every motivation doubted, every attempt at redemption viewed with suspicion. So, what are you saying? Elena asked. What are you asking of me? I'm not asking anything, Daniel said. I'm saying that I understand if you can't forgive me. I'm saying that I understand if the damage is too great and the lies are too deep and the foundation is too broken. I'm saying that I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to be someone worthy of the love you gave me, even if I never get the chance to be with you again. Elena felt tears starting to stream down her face. Daniel. Let me finish, he said gently. I went to see a therapist. A real one. And I've been working through some stuff. And the therapist helped me understand that I was trying to control you through love the same way my mother was trying to control me through money. That I was making decisions for what I thought was best for you without asking you what you actually wanted. And I want you to know that I see that now. I see it, and I'm trying to change it. Is this real? Elena asked. Or is this another story you're telling yourself? I don't know, Daniel said honestly. I think it's real. I think I'm actually changing. But I also understand that change is a process, and it's possible that I'll slip back into old patterns, and it's possible that I'll hurt you again. The only thing I'm certain of is that I'm trying. Elena sat with that, breathing into her phone, trying to figure out what she felt, what she wanted, what came next. I need more time, she said finally. I know, Daniel said. Take all the time you need. Over the next month, something shifted inside Elena. It wasn't a dramatic change. It was small, incremental, barely noticeable at first. But gradually, she started to notice that when she thought about Daniel, she didn't immediately feel anger. She started to notice that she was curious about his therapy, about what he was learning about himself, about how he was changing. She started to notice that she missed him. But she also started to notice something else, that she was afraid. Not of him, but of herself. She was afraid that if she went back to him, she would lose the hard-won independence she'd gained. She was afraid that she would slip back into old patterns of sacrifice and self-erasure. She was afraid that she would, once again, become so focused on holding him together that she would forget to hold herself together. These fears played out during late-night conversations with Dr. Chen. The question, Dr. Chen said one evening as they were cleaning up the clinic, is not whether Daniel deserves another chance. The question is whether you deserve a relationship that's actually healthy and balanced and real. What if I don't know how to have that? Elena asked. What if all I know how to do is sacrifice and work and give everything I have? Then you learn, Dr. Chen said simply. You learn because your life depends on it. Because if you don't learn, you're going to destroy yourself in the name of love, and that's not love. That's self-destruction dressed up as devotion. How do I learn? Elena asked. By being honest with Daniel about what you need, Dr. Chen said. By refusing to accept anything less than genuine partnership and mutual respect. By walking away if he can't give you those things. And by truly believing, that you deserve those things. Elena decided to invite Daniel to meet her at Central Park. She chose a bench overlooking the Bethesda Terrace, the same place they'd sat months ago when he'd first told her about the inheritance. It was a deliberately symbolic choice, returning to the place where everything had fallen apart, potentially to rebuild. He was there waiting for her, and he looked different.
He'd shaved.
He was wearing clean clothes. But more than that, he looked smaller somehow, less certain, less convinced of his own rightness. Hi, he said as Elena sat down beside him. Hi, she replied. They sat in silence for a long moment, watching the city move around them. I want to try, Elena said eventually. I want to try to rebuild this. But I need things to be different. Okay, Daniel said immediately. Tell me what you need. I need you to understand that I'm not someone who exists for you to fix or save or help figure out my life, Elena said carefully. I'm a person with my own goals and my own dreams and my own agency. I need you to respect that, especially when it means I make decisions that you disagree with.
I understand, Daniel said.
I need you to be honest with me, Elena continued. About everything. Your thoughts, your fears, your doubts. I need you to stop trying to protect me with lies because you think that's what I want to hear. I want to hear the truth, even when it's uncomfortable.
I understand, Daniel said again.
And I need you to understand that love isn't about fixing each other, Elena said, her voice getting firmer. Love is about showing up, being present, doing the work even when it's hard. Love is about accepting that the other person is going to disappoint you sometimes, and that's okay, because you're choosing to stay anyway.
I understand, Daniel said.
And Elena, I need to tell you something too. Elena looked at him, waiting. I'm going to make mistakes, Daniel said. I'm going to slip back into old patterns sometimes. I'm going to probably say something stupid and hurt your feelings without meaning to. I'm going to have moments where I'm not sure if I'm doing the right thing, or if I'm just telling myself stories. But I'm committing to you right now. I'm committing to doing the work, to going to therapy, to being honest about my struggles. Can you accept that? Yes, Elena said. I can accept that. And when Daniel reached over and took her hand, Elena realized that something had fundamentally shifted. The relationship was still broken in many ways, but the fractures had been examined, acknowledged, and were in the process of healing. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. Okay, I'm going to be honest with you. This is where the story could go either way. They could fall apart again. They could rebuild and create something beautiful. What do you think happens next? Drop a comment right now because I am living for these responses, and honestly, your input is shaping how I'm thinking about the final parts of this story. And please, if you haven't subscribed yet, this is it. The next part is the turning point, and then we have the climax and the conclusion. This is where everything comes together.
Subscribe now.
3 months into their renewed relationship, Elena received an invitation to a dinner party. It was from Victoria Kane. Elena stood in her studio apartment, holding the cream-colored envelope with its expensive calligraphy, staring at it like it might explode. The letter was polite, formal, carefully worded.
Dear Elena,
I would like to invite you and Daniel to dinner at my home. I understand that this may seem inappropriate given recent events, but I believe it is time for our family to begin the process of genuine reconciliation. I hope you will consider attending. Sincerely,
Victoria Kane.
Elena called Daniel immediately. She's out on bail pending sentencing, Daniel said when she told him about the invitation. She posted $2 million and her lawyer negotiated to let her remain under house arrest in her penthouse. I got a similar invitation this morning. Are you going to go? Elena asked. I don't know, Daniel admitted. Part of me thinks it's important to face her, to show her that I'm not afraid anymore. But another part of me is terrified that if I go, I'm going to slip back into old patterns, that I'm going to become that person who's so desperate for her approval that I'll accept her apologies and pretend everything's fine. Elena was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I'll go with you, but we go as a united front. We go knowing exactly what we're willing to accept and what we're not. We go on our terms, not hers. You'd really do that? Daniel asked. You'd face my mother for me? I'd do it for us, Elena corrected. Because I think we need closure. I think we need to see if genuine reconciliation is possible, or if we need to accept that some relationships are just too broken to fix. The penthouse was everything Elena expected it to be. Sterile, expensive, decorated in that austere style that suggested the owner cared more about impressing people than about actually living. Victoria Kane stood by the window overlooking Central Park, dressed in a Chanel suit that probably cost more than Elena made in 3 months. She looked smaller than Elena remembered. Diminished somehow, like the legal consequences of her actions had physically reduced her. Daniel, Victoria said, turning to embrace her son. Thank you for coming. Daniel accepted the embrace stiffly, but he did accept it. Elena watched this interaction with fascination, trying to understand the complicated tangle of history and blood and obligation that existed between them. Then Victoria turned to Elena. Miss Prescott, she said, extending her hand. I want to apologize. For all of it. For underestimating you, for trying to manipulate my son, for the harm I caused to both of you. Elena shook her hand, but she didn't smile. Apologies are easy, she said quietly. Actions are harder. You're right, Victoria acknowledged. Which is why I wanted to tell you about something I've decided to do. She gestured for them to follow her to the study. On the desk was a stack of papers, legal documents, Elena realized, thick and official-looking. I'm establishing a trust, Victoria explained. For the clinic. For Dr. Chen's organization. $200 million, structured so that it can't be revoked or manipulated. It's going to be completely separate from Daniel's inheritance, completely separate from my own assets. And I'm stepping down from my position at Kane Holdings. I've decided that I'm going to dedicate the rest of my life to funding healthcare initiatives and working to undo some of the harm my family has caused through our business practices. Daniel stared at the documents. Mother, I don't understand. What's changed? Victoria looked at her son with an expression Elena had never seen before. Genuine vulnerability. Genuine regret. I've been in therapy, Victoria said. Court-ordered therapy, which is ironic given that I tried to get you declared mentally unfit. And my therapist helped me understand that I've spent my entire life trying to control people because I was terrified of losing them. I tried to control your father, and he left me. I tried to control you, and you left me. And the only way I knew how to cope with that fear was to try to control more, manipulate more, hurt more people. She paused, looking directly at Elena. I saw in you a threat to my control over Daniel, Victoria continued. And instead of accepting that my son was capable of making his own choices, instead of respecting his autonomy, I tried to destroy you. I tried to destroy both of you. And I want you to know that I understand now how wrong that was. Understanding doesn't undo the damage, Elena said quietly. I know, Victoria said, which is why I'm doing this. Not to earn your forgiveness, but because it's the right thing to do. The dinner that followed was awkward and complicated and, in its own way, healing. Victoria asked questions, real questions, about Elena's life, her work, her dreams. She listened to the answers without interrupting, without trying to redirect the conversation, without making it about herself. She asked Daniel about his therapy, about what he was learning, about his plans for the future. She didn't try to influence his decisions or steer him toward what she thought was best. It was, Elena realized, the first genuine conversation any of them had ever had. As they were leaving, Victoria pulled Daniel aside. I know I can't undo what I did, Victoria said quietly. But I want you to know that I'm proud of you. Not because you have money or because you won a legal case, but because you're trying to be a good person. You're doing the work. You're facing your failures and trying to grow from them. That takes courage, Daniel. That takes real strength. Daniel hugged his mother, and Elena could see him crying. Okay, I need to stop and ask you something. Do you believe in redemption? Can people actually change? Or are we all just performing different versions of the same flawed selves? Drop a comment, because this question has been haunting me for years, and I genuinely want to understand your perspective. And if you're not subscribed yet, where are you? We are in the turning point of the story, and everything is about to come together. Subscribe now because the next parts will literally give you chills. When Elena and Daniel left the penthouse, they walked through Central Park in the late evening light. The city around them was settling into dusk, the sky turning shades of orange and purple. I don't know if I believe she's actually changed, Daniel said as they walked. I don't know if people can actually fundamentally transform who they are. Maybe not fundamentally, Elena said, but maybe they can choose different responses. Maybe they can choose to be aware of their patterns and make different decisions anyway. Is that enough? Daniel asked. For you? Elena asked. I think it has to be. Because the alternative is to carry around bitterness and resentment forever. And that's going to destroy you more than it destroys her. They walked in silence for a while longer. I've been thinking about something, Daniel said eventually. About the foundation. About actually starting it, but doing it differently this time. Differently how? Elena asked. I want you to be a full partner, Daniel said. Not just in name, but actually. I want to hire people who have lived experience with poverty, with healthcare inequality, with housing insecurity. I want their voices to be at the center of decision-making, not mine. I want to use my money and my privilege to amplify their voices, not to overshadow them. Elena stopped walking and turned to face him. That's actually a really good idea. Yeah. Daniel looked hopeful. Yeah, Elena confirmed. That's exactly what's been missing from every wealthy person's attempt to fix society, actually listening to the people who are affected by the problems. So, you'll help me? Daniel asked. You'll actually be my partner in this? Elena took his hand. Yes, she said. I'll be your partner. Over the next 3 months, Daniel and Elena worked to establish the foundation properly. They hired a board that included Dr. Chen, several nurses from the clinic, formerly homeless individuals who had found stability, activists who had been fighting for healthcare reform for decades. They established the mission, not to save people, but to empower them. Not to impose solutions, but to support the solutions that communities identified for themselves. It was slow work.
It was complicated.
It required Daniel to constantly check his impulses to control, to dominate, to assume that he knew what was best. But Elena was there, gently pushing back when he slipped into old patterns, celebrating when he caught himself and course-corrected. One evening, while they were working late in the small office they'd rented in Washington Heights, deliberately in Elena's neighborhood, deliberately not in some fancy midtown tower, Daniel looked at Elena across the desk and said something that stopped her cold. I love you, he said simply. Not in the way I loved you before, when I was using you to prove something to myself, but in a real way. In a way that means I want what's best for you, even if that's not me. In a way that means I respect your autonomy and your intelligence and your dreams. In a way that means I'm committed to doing the work every single day to be someone worthy of your love. Elena felt tears prickling at her eyes. I love you too, she said. And I believe you. I believe that you're actually trying. There's something else, Daniel said, and he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Elena's heart stopped. I'm not proposing right now, Daniel said quickly, seeing her expression. Because I know that after everything that's happened, you need time to trust that my decisions are genuine. But I want you to know that I'm planning to ask you to marry me. Not tomorrow, not next week, but sometime when you're ready. Sometime when you believe that I'm the person I'm trying to become. Daniel. Let me finish, he said. I want to marry you not because I want to own you or control you or make you responsible for my happiness. I want to marry you because you make me want to be better. You make me want to actually do the work of being a decent human being. You make me want to build a life that's real instead of a life that's a performance. Elena took the box and opened it. Inside was a simple ring, no ostentatious diamonds, no dramatic statement. Just a beautiful, understated band of white gold with a small sapphire. I'm not saying yes yet, Elena said, smiling through her tears. But I'm saying that I believe you. I believe that you mean this. That's all I'm asking for, Daniel said. Just belief. Just the chance to prove that I'm capable of genuine love. It was around this time that Elena received an unexpected visitor at the clinic. James Rothman, the homeless man who had warned her about burning out, came in during evening hours. He was clean and sober, and he was wearing clothes that actually fit. James, Elena said, delighted to see him. What brings you in? Are you okay? I'm more than okay, James said, grinning. I wanted to thank you for everything. I didn't do anything special, Elena said. You did for me what that boyfriend of yours is trying to do for the whole world, James said. You listened. You treated me like a person, not a problem. And then you remembered me. You remembered that I was here, that I existed, that I mattered. Elena sat down across from him. Where are you living now? I got into a housing program, James said. One of those affordable housing units that your boyfriend's foundation is funding. I got a job as a peer counselor, helping other people experiencing homelessness navigate the system. And I got sober.
He paused.
I've been sober for 4 months. That's incredible, James, Elena said, and she meant it. It's all because someone decided to see me as a person instead of a problem, James said. That's what you guys are trying to do with this foundation, right? See people as people? That's the idea, Elena confirmed. Well, keep doing it, James said. Because it works. It actually works. After James left, Elena sat in the quiet clinic and allowed herself to feel something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Not naive hope, not the kind that ignored all the systemic injustice and suffering in the world. But real hope, the kind that came from seeing concrete evidence that change was possible, that effort mattered, that love and work and persistence could actually make a difference. Okay, I need you to understand something. This is the moment where the story could still go wrong. James's recovery, the foundation's success, Daniel's genuine transformation, these could all be temporary. What do you think happens next? Drop a comment because I genuinely want to know if you believe in happy endings or if you think this is all too good to be true. And subscribe. We are so close to the climax and resolution, and you do not want to miss it. This is where everything comes together. 6 months after the dinner with Victoria Kane, Elena and Daniel attended a gala held by the foundation to celebrate their first major milestone. They had funded the opening of 5 new community health clinics across New York City, each one staffed by people from the communities they served, each one operating under a model of community empowerment rather than charity. Elena wore a dress, an actual nice dress that Daniel had insisted on buying for her, though she negotiated fiercely to make sure it wasn't ostentatious. Daniel wore a tuxedo, and they looked like exactly what they were, people from completely different worlds who had somehow managed to build a bridge across that divide. At the gala, Elena was approached by a woman she didn't recognize. Elena Prescott? The woman said. My name is Catherine Stone. I wrote that article about you and Daniel. Elena's entire body went tense. Hello. I wanted to apologize, Catherine said, for how I framed the story. I was so focused on the drama of the deception and the money that I missed the real story. Which is? Elena asked carefully. Which is that real love is about choosing to show up for someone even when they disappoint you, Catherine said. Which is that redemption is possible if both people are willing to do the work. Which is that change is slow and difficult and unglamorous, but it's real when it happens. Elena studied Catherine for a moment. Are you writing another article? I am, Catherine confirmed, and I want to get it right this time. I want to tell the true story of what happened, not the sensationalized version. Would you be willing to talk to me? To actually share your perspective? Elena looked over at Daniel across the room, talking with Dr. Chun and members of the foundation's board. He caught her eye and smiled, a genuine smile that contained no calculation, no performance, no hidden agenda. She turned back to Catherine. Yes, she said. I'll talk to you, but on one condition. What's that? Catherine asked. That you also talk to Daniel about his journey, Elena said. Not just my sacrifice, not just his deception, but his actual struggle to become a different person. Because that's the real story. That's the part that matters. Okay, we are so close to the ending. We have the climactic resolution, and then the satisfying conclusion left. What do you think is going to happen? Will it be a beautiful love story resolution? Will there be one final twist? Drop a comment right now and tell me what you hope happens, because your engagement on this story has been absolutely incredible. And if you still haven't subscribed, what are you doing? The next 2 parts will wrap up everything and give you the payoff you deserve. Subscribe now. This is the home stretch, folks. We're about to cross the finish line. The article Catherine Stone wrote changed everything. It came out in the New York Times Sunday magazine, a long-form piece titled From Deception to Redemption, One couple's journey through wealth, love, and self-discovery. It was brutal and honest and heartbreaking and hopeful all at once. Catherine didn't shy away from Daniel's lies. She documented in explicit detail how he'd hidden his inheritance, how he'd let Elena sacrifice 6 months of her life working 4 jobs, how his deception had been rooted in a pathological need to control the narrative of who he was. She quoted his therapist, with his permission, about how his behavior mirrored his mother's need for control, just inverted. She was unflinching in her assessment of his privilege and his blindness. But she also documented his genuine attempts to change. She interviewed Dr. Chen, who described working with Elena and Daniel on the foundation. She interviewed James Rothman, who talked about how the housing program had saved his life. She interviewed 3 different formerly homeless individuals who had gotten jobs as peer counselors and were now changing their own communities. She interviewed the board members who confirmed that Daniel had actually stepped back and let others lead, that he'd learned to listen instead of dominate, that he was genuinely trying to be part of a movement for change rather than trying to lead it. And most powerfully, she interviewed Elena. Elena talked about what it felt like to work 4 jobs. She talked about the exhaustion, the desperation, the way her entire identity had been consumed by survival. She talked about what it felt like to discover the truth about Daniel's inheritance and to realize that she'd been lied to, manipulated, turned into a supporting character in someone else's story of redemption. But she also talked about forgiveness. Not in a way that was easy or simple or that suggested the hurt had magically disappeared, but in a way that acknowledged that Daniel was genuinely trying to change, that she believed his efforts were real, that love didn't mean ignoring betrayal but rather facing it and deciding to stay anyway. "He broke my trust," Elena was quoted as saying. "And I don't know if trust can ever be fully repaired. But I know that he's spending every single day trying to be worthy of a second chance. And I think that matters. I think that effort matters. I think that's what real love looks like. Not the absence of pain or betrayal, but the choice to keep showing up even after you've been hurt." The article went viral. Within 48 hours, it had been shared hundreds of thousands of times. News outlets were running stories about the foundation's work. Universities were inviting Daniel to speak about wealth and privilege and responsibility. Nonprofits across the country were reaching out wanting to partner with the foundation, wanting to adopt the model that prioritized community voice and empowerment. And then something unexpected happened. Victoria Kane did an interview with 60 Minutes. In the interview, she talked openly about her attempt to discredit Daniel, about her reasons, her fear of losing control, her belief that she knew what was best for him, her inability to accept that her son was a separate person with his own desires and dreams. She talked about her diagnosis of narcissistic personality disorder, a diagnosis she'd received in therapy and had initially denied. She talked about the years she'd spent manipulating and controlling people in her business and in her family, and the damage she'd caused. But most importantly, she talked about the foundation, not as something Daniel was doing, but as something he was doing with a community that had lived experience with the problems they were trying to solve. "I spent my entire life believing that I had the answers," Victoria said in the interview. "I believed that because I had money and power and education, I was qualified to make decisions about other people's lives. I was wrong. Profoundly wrong. And my son understood something I never did. That real change comes from listening to the people who are actually living through the problems, not from imposing solutions from above." The interviewer asked if Victoria thought she deserved forgiveness. Victoria was quiet for a long moment before answering. "I think forgiveness is something that other people grant, not something I deserve," she said carefully. "My job isn't to deserve forgiveness. My job is to spend the rest of my life trying to undo the harm I've caused. If that leads to forgiveness eventually, that's a gift. But it's not something I'm entitled to." Okay, I need to pause here because this is crucial. Victoria Kane just made a statement that essentially acknowledged her culpability and changed her entire approach to life. Do you believe her? Or do you think this is just another performance? Drop a comment because honestly, this is the question that determines everything about how we interpret the rest of a story. Is redemption real, or is it just a different mask we wear? And please, if you haven't subscribed yet, now is the time. We are literally at the climax of this story, and the next part is the resolution where everything comes together. The conversation between Daniel, Victoria, and Elena happened 3 weeks after the 60 Minutes interview aired. Victoria had requested a meeting, and this time, Elena had agreed. They met at a neutral location, not Victoria's penthouse, not Daniel's apartment, but a restaurant in Midtown that none of them frequented. Victoria arrived first, and when Daniel and Elena walked in, Elena could see genuine nervousness on the older woman's face. "Thank you for coming," Victoria said as they sat down. "I know that I don't deserve your time or your attention." "No, you don't," Elena said simply. She wasn't being cruel, she was being honest. And everyone at the table seemed to understand that honesty was the only currency that mattered now. "I wanted to talk to you both about something," Victoria continued. She pulled out a folder and set it on the table. "I'm establishing a foundation in Elena's name. The Elena Prescott Foundation for Healthcare Equity. I'm endowing it with $100 million. It will operate completely independently from Daniel's foundation, and its entire focus will be on training nurses and healthcare workers from underserved communities to become leaders in their field." Preparing for this their entire lives. Elena stared at the papers. "And you've been comprehending what she was looking at. You've been working 4 jobs, Victoria said people at the clinic, not rebuilding our relationship and building a foundation. I think it fixes anything. You're going to be fine. I'm doing it because that night, I finally understand Elena had a moment of genuine the work panic. You've been doing at the clinic. She was sitting in the apartment they now shared. Those are the things that actually matter in the world. That was theirs. Not wealth, funded by power, both of them. Not the ability to control things they'd chosen together. Work that serves others. She was looking at her acceptance elevates letter, others, and she was terrified. Real change. What if I fail? That's what matters. She asked Daniel. Daniel, what if I get to medical school and squeezed Elena's hand? I'm not smart enough. There's something else. What if I'm too Victoria tired? Continued. What if I've decided to step away Daniel from the sat down across entirely, from her and took I'm both selling my stake in Kane Holdings. You're the strongest person I know. He said quietly. The proceeds will go You've to worked the 4 jobs, and I've survived also established a scholarship program for You've people dealt with my low-income backgrounds and my manipulation business school and my family drama. Mission of learning how to build something meaningful from nothing. Community-focused. If anyone is capable of becoming a doctor, why are you telling us this? But Elena asked. No, what if? I wanted you to know that your impact on my son has ripple effects. You're going to medical school because you're going to become real love incredible doctor, and he showed me what it looks like to support you in every way I can. I'm trying, even if genuinely it means less time to change too. Elena asked. Victoria looked at Elena. Even if it means directly. You have to handle most of the foundation work for a while. I know that my attempts even to discredit you, Daniel, to separate you from Daniel, because loving you means money as a weapon against you, not mine. I know all because of that you deserve to become everything you're capable of becoming. But I want you to know that I understand now how wrong I was, and she felt something settle inside. Spend the rest of my life trying to be better, a sense of rightness. Elena felt tears prickling in her eyes. They had actually managed to build something without looking away. The night before Elena started medical school, I believe received a phone call from Dr. I don't know if I trust you yet. I wanted to tell you something I don't know if I ever will, Dr. Chen said. But I believe that you're genuinely trying to change. What? Elena asked. That's all I can ask sitting on the edge of her bed, Victoria said, nervous about 3 months later. Elena Prescott made a decision that shocked everyone. Effective she applied to medical school. Elena's stomach dropped. She'd been thinking about it for months, had actually been encouraged to apply by Dr. 40 years by Daniel by the board of the foundation said. She was tired of working as a nurse but when she was capable of being a doctor. I'm tired in a way that being in a position where she had to implement the decisions of others rather than for the clinic would be to let someone else lead it. The application was competitive. Who? And Elena knew her chances were limited. She was older than most applicants. When you graduate, she didn't have a traditional educational background. I want to hand over the clinic to you. She'd been working survival jobs for most of her adult life. You but can. She got in. Dr. Chen Columbia University Medical School accepted her with a heart and the vision. Funded, you understand what the clinic is supposed to do by the Elena Prescott Foundation. You won't let it be corrupted by money or politics or anything else. This is incredible. I can't think Daniel of anyone I'd rather have leading it. This is Elena felt tears streaming down her face. It's also terrifying. Think about it, Elena Dr. Chen said. I'm going to be the oldest person in my class, but I wanted you to know that that's the path I'm offering you. a clinic of your own, a chance to lead. After hanging up with Dr. Chin, Elena sat in the darkness of her apartment and let herself cry. Cry from relief, cry from overwhelm, cry from the sheer reality of how far she'd come. She'd gone from working 4 jobs to keep her boyfriend afloat to being accepted to medical school with a full scholarship. She'd gone from being lied to and manipulated to being in a relationship where she was genuinely respected and valued. She'd gone from being someone's project to being someone who had her own projects, her own dreams, her own future. Daniel found her in the darkness. "What's wrong?" he asked, sitting beside her. "Nothing," Elena said. "Everything. Everything is good, Daniel. Everything is actually good, and I'm terrified that it's going to fall apart." "It might," Daniel said quietly. "Life is unpredictable. We might hurt each other again. I might make mistakes. You might decide this isn't what you want anymore. But Elena, I truly believe that what we've built is strong enough to handle whatever comes next." "How can you be so sure?" Elena asked. "Because I'm not taking anything for granted anymore," Daniel said. "Because I'm doing the work every single day to be someone worthy of you. Because I've learned that love isn't about grand gestures or perfect moments. It's about showing up, being honest, and choosing to stay even when it's hard." Elena leaned against him in the darkness, and she realized that something fundamental had shifted. She was no longer waiting for her life to begin. She was no longer working 4 jobs just to survive. She was no longer building her future on someone else's foundation. She was living. "Okay, I need to ask you something real. Do you think Elena and Daniel are actually going to make it? Or do you think this is too good to be true? Drop a comment because I genuinely want to know what you believe. Is this a story where love conquers all, or is it a story where people change and grow but ultimately go their separate ways? And please, 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 if you haven't subscribed yet, subscribe right now. We are so close to the ending, and the final part is going to tie everything together in a way that will absolutely blow your mind. 1 year after Elena started medical school, Catherine Stone's follow-up article came out. It was titled 1 year Later, How Love, Work, and Accountability Changed Everything. Catherine had followed up with Elena, Daniel, Victoria, Dr. Chen, James Rothman, and others who had been part of the story. She documented how the foundation had grown, how Elena was thriving in medical school, despite the exhaustion and challenges, how Daniel continued to do the work of being a better person, how Victoria had fundamentally transformed her life. But there was one revelation in the article that nobody expected. Victoria Kane had cancer. Stage 4 ovarian cancer, diagnosed 6 months earlier. She had chosen not to publicize it, had chosen instead to quietly spend her remaining time, the doctors estimated 18 months to 2 years, trying to create lasting change through her foundations. "I spent my entire life trying to control my legacy," Victoria was quoted as saying. "Trying to ensure that people would remember me as powerful, successful, important. But now I realize that the only legacy that matters is the one we create through how we treat other people. I'd rather be remembered as someone who tried to make things better than as someone who is powerful." The article also included quotes from Elena about what it felt like to pursue her dream of becoming a doctor while also being part of a romantic relationship, about the balance she was trying to strike between her own ambitions and her commitment to Daniel. "I think the healthiest thing we did," Elena was quoted as saying, "was to stop trying to make our relationship fix us. We stopped believing that love could be a substitute for therapy, for work, for growth. And once we stopped doing that, our relationship actually became stronger because it was built on genuine partnership instead of desperate need." Daniel was quoted about how he'd learned to use his privilege responsibly, how he'd learned to listen instead of dominate, how he'd learned that real change was slower and harder than he'd expected. "I think the myth we tell about people with wealth and privilege is that we can just throw money at problems and fix them," Daniel said. "But I've learned that real change requires humility. It requires listening to people who have lived experience with these problems. It requires admitting that I don't have all the answers and actually learning from the people I'm trying to help. Okay, we are at the final part of this story. Everything has come together. The lies have been revealed. The growth has been documented. The redemption has begun. But now we need the resolution. We need to see where these characters end up, how they've changed, what their future looks like. Drop a comment right now. What do you think happens in the final part? Do you think Elena and Daniel get married? Do you think Elena becomes a doctor? Do you think they all find peace and healing? And if you still haven't subscribed, this is it. This is your moment. The final part is going to bring this all home, and you absolutely cannot miss it. Elena stood in front of the mirror in her white coat, watching herself for a moment before accepting the reality of what she was seeing.
Дери Елена Прескот.
That's who looked back at her. It had taken 4 years. 4 years of medical school, while also serving on the board of Daniel's foundation. For years of residency, while watching her relationship with Daniel deepen and strengthen in ways she never could have imagined. For years of building something real, something lasting, something that was genuinely hers. Today was her first day as attending physician at the newly reopened Elena Prescott Community Health Center in Washington Heights. The clinic had been transformed. Where Dr. Chen's small basement operation had once served dozens of patients a week, the new clinic, funded by both the foundation and a network of grants Elena had helped secure, now served hundreds. It had multiple exam rooms, a small pharmacy, mental health services, dental care, and a program to train community health workers from the neighborhood to become nurses and doctors. Elena walked through the halls of the clinic, greeting staff members she'd helped hire, seeing patients she'd worked with during her training. She felt something bloom in her chest, not just pride, but a deep sense of rightness. This was what all of it had been for. This was what the sacrifices had been building toward. At noon, Daniel arrived with lunch. He'd taken on a bigger role in running the foundation, had become more visibly involved in the organization's work, but he was careful never to overstep, never to dominate, never to forget that this was about the communities they served, not about him. First day treating patients as Dr. Prescott? He asked, kissing her cheek as he set down the bags of food. First day, Elena confirmed. It feels surreal. They ate together in Elena's small office, talking about her patients, about the foundation's latest initiative, about the small details of daily life that had become so precious to Elena. These moments of quiet connection with someone who genuinely supported her dreams. I have something I want to tell you, Daniel said as they were finishing lunch. Something I've been planning. Elena felt her heart skip. She knew what was coming. Daniel had been planning this for months. She'd accidentally discovered the ring when she was cleaning and had pretended she hadn't seen it. I'm listening, she said, trying to keep her expression neutral. I want to marry you, Daniel said, and he got down on one knee in the small office with its stack of medical files and its view of the clinic's waiting room. Not because I think marriage will fix us or complete us or make us whole. We're already whole. I want to marry you because I want to spend the rest of my life choosing you. I want to wake up every day and decide that I'm going to be better, be kinder, be more present, because I want to be someone worthy of being your husband. He pulled out the sapphire ring he'd shown her months before, the one he'd been wearing in secret, knowing she knew about it but asking her anyway. Elena Prescott, Daniel said, and his voice was steady and clear and absolutely certain. Will you marry me? Yes, Elena said immediately, and she was crying and laughing at the same time. Yes, absolutely yes. Daniel slipped the ring on her finger, and then they were holding each other in that small office, surrounded by the evidence of all the work they'd done together. Okay, I need to pause here because I'm crying. This is the moment where love actually wins, not in a way that's naive or ignores reality, but in a way that's earned. Are you crying too? Drop a comment and tell me how you're feeling, because I genuinely need to know that this landed the way I intended. And if you're not subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? We're literally in the final moments of a story, and I want you to experience the ending with me. Victoria Kane passed away 18 months after Daniel's proposal. She went peacefully, in her own bed, surrounded by the people she loved. Daniel was there. Elena was there. Even James Rothman came to say goodbye, telling Victoria how the housing program had changed his life, how he'd gotten his own apartment and his own job, how he was giving back by helping others navigate the system. Victoria died smiling, and Elena believed, genuinely believed, that she'd finally made peace with herself. At the funeral, the Elena Prescott Foundation for Healthcare Equity was in the early stages of its most ambitious project, a network of community-led clinics across all 5 boroughs of New York City, each one staffed by healthcare workers from the communities they served, each one operating under a model of true partnership and empowerment. Victoria's will left the vast majority of her remaining estate to the 2 foundations, Daniel's and Elena's. It was enough money to ensure that the work would continue for generations. But more importantly, Victoria's legacy was the documentation of her transformation. The 60 Minutes interview had become a teaching tool in business schools across the country. Catherine Stone had written a book about the Kane family story, about wealth, privilege, deception, and redemption, that had become a bestseller. Victoria Kane had become proof that people could change, that it was never too late to recognize your mistakes and try to make amends, that redemption wasn't easy, wasn't guaranteed, but was possible if you were willing to do the work. The wedding took place 2 years after Daniel's proposal, on a Saturday in June, in Central Park. Elena wore a simple white dress that she'd chosen herself, rejecting the designer gowns that various boutiques had offered. Daniel wore a suit that fit him perfectly, not ostentatious, not trying to make a statement, just a good man in good clothes ready to marry the woman he loved. Dr. Chen walked Elena down the aisle. James Rothman was one of Daniel's groomsmen. The board of the foundation was scattered throughout the audience. Catherine Stone sat near the front, documenting the moment for what would become the epilogue to her book. When Elena and Daniel exchanged vows, they weren't the traditional words. They were promises they'd written themselves, promises that acknowledged the reality of their relationship, that it had been built on lies, that it had been broken and repaired, that it was real and flawed and worth fighting for. "I promise to be honest with you," Elena said, her voice steady as she looked into Daniel's eyes. "Even when honesty is hard. Even when it would be easier to pretend. Because I believe that real love is built on truth." "I promise to listen to you," Daniel said. "To actually hear what you're saying instead of waiting for my turn to speak. To trust your wisdom, respect your autonomy, and support your dreams, even when they might not include me." "I promise to keep growing," Elena continued. "To keep changing, keep learning, keep becoming a better version of myself. Not for you, but because I deserve to become the person I'm capable of being." "And I promise," Daniel said, "to do the work, every single day, to face my privilege, acknowledge my past mistakes, and spend my life trying to use what I have to help create a more just world. Not to save my own soul, but because it's the right thing to do." When they kissed, the entire crowd erupted in cheers. 5 years after the wedding, Elena stood in front of a graduating class of community health workers, 40 individuals from neighborhoods across New York City who had gone through the Elena Prescott Foundation's training program and were now ready to transform healthcare in their own communities. The program had grown beyond Elena's wildest dreams. It had expanded to 3 other cities. It had trained over 200 healthcare workers. It had fundamentally changed how community health was delivered in multiple neighborhoods. "When I started this," Elena told the graduates, "I was working 4 jobs just to survive. I was exhausted. I was broken. I didn't believe that change was possible. But then I met people who showed me that change was possible. People who believed in me even when I didn't believe in myself. People who gave me the resources and support to pursue my dreams." She looked out at the faces of the graduates, faces that represented every ethnicity, every socioeconomic background, every experience of struggle and survival. I'm standing here today as a doctor because someone decided to believe in me, Elena continued. Because someone, even though he'd hurt me, even though he'd lied to me, was willing to do the work to become a better person. I'm asking you to do the same. I'm asking you to go out into your communities and not just provide health care, but to actually listen to the people you serve, to empower them, to believe in them, and to do the work to become the best version of yourself. After the ceremony, Daniel found her in the hallway. I'm proud of you, he said, kissing her forehead. So incredibly proud. We did this together, Elena said. We built this together. We did, Daniel agreed. But Elena, I want you to know something. I was thinking about going back to school. I want to get my MBA, but specifically in social enterprise. I want to learn how to build businesses that are structured to serve communities instead of extracting wealth from them. Would you be okay with that?
Elena smiled.
Of course I would. I think that's perfect. You'll be okay if I'm in school at the same time you're running the clinic? Daniel asked. We'll figure it out, Elena said. Just like we figured out everything else. Okay, I'm going to be real with you for a second. This is where the story ends because this is where Elena and Daniel's individual journeys become a shared journey that's strong enough to carry whatever comes next. But I want to know, do you think they'll stay together? Do you think their love is strong enough? Drop a comment because this is genuinely the question that's been at the heart of this entire story. And if you haven't subscribed yet, thank you for sticking with this story all the way to the end. Whether you subscribed or not, I'm genuinely grateful that you experienced this journey with me. But please hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next story I'm working on. It's going to be just as emotional, just as complex, and just as real. 10 years after Elena started her medical career, she received a call that changed everything. It was from Columbia University. They wanted to offer her a position as a professor in their medical school, not to teach clinical medicine, but to teach a new course about healthcare equity, about listening to community voices, about the intersection of medicine and social justice. You'd have to lecture, they explained, but you could structure your practice around the teaching. You could keep working at the clinic. You could maintain your role with the foundation. Elena called an emergency meeting with Daniel. I want to do it, she said immediately. I want to teach. I want to help train the next generation of doctors to understand that healthcare isn't separate from justice, that medicine isn't separate from politics, that who we are as doctors is intimately connected to how we show up for the people we serve. Then do it, Daniel said. You don't need my permission, Elena. You don't need my approval. You just need to know that I'll support you however I can. I know, Elena said.
And it was true.
She knew that Daniel would show up, that he would help, that he would support her dreams without trying to control them or take credit for them. She knew because he'd spent 15 years proving it. The first class Elena taught at Columbia Medical School had 120 students packed into an auditorium. She stood at the podium, looking out at their faces, and she thought about the journey that had brought her here. She thought about the 4 jobs. She thought about the lies. She thought about the moment when she'd realized that her boyfriend was secretly a $500 million heir. She thought about how close she'd come to giving up entirely. My name is Dr. Elena Prescott, she said, and her voice was steady and clear. And I'm here to teach you that medicine is not a neutral profession. When you become a doctor, you're not just treating individual patients. You're participating in a system that either perpetuates inequality or works to reduce it. You're making a choice about whose lives matter, whose suffering deserves attention, whose voices deserve to be heard. She paused, letting that sink in. I'm here to teach you that healthcare equity is not a side project. It's not something you do after you've made it in your career. It's the foundation of everything we do as healers. It's the reason we become doctors in the first place, to serve people, to reduce suffering, to create a world where everyone has access to the care they need. As Elena taught, she noticed something remarkable happening. She noticed students leaning forward, actually engaged, actually thinking about the implications of what she was saying. She noticed them taking notes not because they had to, but because they genuinely wanted to understand. After class, a young woman approached her. "Dr. Prescott," she said nervously, "I wanted to thank you. I'm the first person in my family to go to college, let alone medical school. And I've felt like I don't belong here. But hearing your story, hearing you talk about where you came from and how you got here, it made me realize that my background isn't a liability. It's an asset. It's something that gives me perspective that other doctors don't have." Elena felt tears prickling at her eyes. "Your background is absolutely an asset," Elena said. "And you absolutely belong here. Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise." That night, she told Daniel about the conversation. "That's what it's all been for," Daniel said quietly. "That's the whole point. Creating space for people who didn't grow up thinking they could be doctors, lawyers, leaders, healers. Creating systems that recognize that the most important thing isn't where you came from, but what you're willing to do to help others." Elena leaned against him, and she realized something fundamental. They'd actually done it. Not perfectly, not without mistakes and failures and difficult conversations. But they'd actually built something that mattered. They'd actually created change. 15 years after Daniel proposed in her clinic office, Elena and Daniel sat on the same bench in Central Park where they'd sat so many times before. The bench overlooking Bethesda Terrace, the bench where so many important conversations had happened. "Do you ever regret it?" Daniel asked. "The whole thing? Do you ever wish you'd just walked away that day when you found out about the money?" Elena was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know if I regret it," she said finally. "But I do know that if I had walked away, I would have been making a choice based on fear and anger. And while both of those emotions were valid, walking away because of them would have meant letting fear and anger determine my future." "So you stayed because you chose to?" Daniel asked. "I stayed because I chose to believe that you could change," Elena said. "And you did. Not perfectly. You're still working on it. You still have moments where your privilege blinds you, where you think you have all the answers, where you try to control instead of listen. But you genuinely try. You genuinely do the work." "And you?" Daniel asked. "Have you changed?"
Elena smiled.
"I've changed completely. I went from being someone who worked 4 jobs just to survive to being someone who leads clinics, teaches at medical schools, shapes policy. I went from being someone who sacrificed everything for love to being someone who demands authentic partnership. I went from being someone's project to being someone with my own projects, my own vision, my own future." "I'm so proud of you," Daniel said. "I know," Elena said. "And I'm proud of you too. We did this together. We built this together. We saved each other." And that's where the story ends. Not with happily ever after, because life isn't that simple and love isn't that easy. But with something better. With 2 people who've done the work, who've faced their mistakes, who've genuinely changed, and who've built a partnership that's strong enough to handle whatever comes next. Okay, I need to talk to you about what just happened. This story started with Elena working 4 jobs to pay for Daniel's debts. It moved through lies, deception, betrayal, and heartbreak. It moved through the hard work of genuine redemption and transformation. And it ended with 2 people who had built something real, not perfect, but real. Here's what I want you to understand. This story isn't about money fixing everything. It's not about love conquering all without effort. It's about 2 people who genuinely did the work to become better versions of themselves. It's about accountability. It's about the long, difficult process of actual change. So here's my question for you. Did this ending satisfy you? Do you believe that Elena and Daniel actually made it? Drop a comment right now and tell me what you think. Tell me if you wanted a different ending. Tell me if you believe in redemption and second chances, or if you think some things are too broken to fix. And please, if you haven't subscribed yet, subscribe now. Not just for me, but for yourself. You've invested this entire journey in Elena and Daniel's story. You deserve to be part of a community that engages with stories that matter, stories that make us think about love and sacrifice and what it means to genuinely change. Now, I want to hear from you. 1. What was your favorite moment in the story? 2. Do you believe in redemption? 3. Would you have made the same choices as Elena? 4. What do you think happens next for Elena and Daniel? 5. Are you subscribed yet? Drop a comment with any of these thoughts, and let's build a community around stories that matter, characters that feel real, and conversations that actually mean something. Thank you for spending this time with me. Thank you for caring. And I genuinely cannot wait to tell you the next story.
Subscribe, comment, share.
And I'll see you in the next one.